Chapter 758. This strong will didn't come from a stranger's will, but from Naruto's will, which Sasuke himself was very familiar with. Although the two chose different paths, they still have trust in each other beyond ordinary people, so Sasuke instinctively let Naruto's consciousness enter his body. When the strong will integrated into Sasuke's brain, Sasuke finally understood why Naruto passed his will into his body. What Naruto's will brought to Sasuke was nothing else but a visual sharing. Because of the visual limitation, Sasuke couldn't tell how many people were fighting in the scene he could see at the moment, but such a scale of battle had at least hundreds of people fighting each other. Blood splashed in the air, lives were taken directly, and corpses fell directly to the ground and were trampled. This was a battlefield, and this was a battlefield that Naruto and Sasuke were very familiar with. That's Yondaime Hokage? Sasuke constantly recognized the audio and video passed into his brain, and a very familiar but not so familiar figure directly entered Sasuke's cognition. The Haori with flame lines was now stained with blood and became ragged because of the fierce battle, revealing the green ninja vest inside. Although he lost one of his arms, Watergate was still tightly holding a flying thunder god in one hand and attacking around him, responding to the opponent's attacks with almost instinctive frenzied attacks. No wonder Naruto's expression became like that. It turned out that Yondaime Hokage was in such a dangerous situation. Although the image transmitted to him wasn't from God's perspective, but from the crowd, Sasuke could see that everything in his line of sight at this moment was happening on the battlefield a little far away from himself and Naruto. The loss of life and the flow of blood are inevitable for a qualified ninja to face. Although Naruto, as the child of Hokage, was protected in various aspects, but there were definitely hundreds of people who died in the hands of Naruto, not to mention Sasuke. When he was under Orochimaru, he had been trained by Orochimaru in an almost harsh way. At that time, the number of people's lives on Sasuke's hands had exceeded 500. After that, he left Orochimaru's hands in Akatsuki and Nangongja's hands. Now, the number of people's lives in Sasuke's hands is definitely not less than 1,000. But no matter how many people's lives are in their hands, as human beings with their own independent souls and not tools, Naruto and Sasuke still have people in their hearts who can't be hurt no matter what. For Naruto, Namake's Watergate was naturally such a person. Originally, in the battle with Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate lost his own arm because of Kill Ash, and now he was directly forced into such a dangerous situation. Even if Naruto was deeply righteous and optimistic, he couldn't suppress his inner emotions in the face of all this. After seeing Namake's Watergate situation, Sasuke didn't pay much attention. After all, although Namake's Watergate was under the siege of two 5 Elements Altar Lords, he could still barely hold on for a while. At this moment, there was no danger to his life. On the contrary, after seeing Watergate's situation, Sasuke was quite anxious to find the figure of his teacher, Blood Cloak Pavilion's head Nangongja in the crowd. For Naruto, his father was one of the people who couldn't be hurt, and for Sasuke, Nangongja, who was his teacher and father, was naturally such an existence. After constant searching, Sasuke finally found the figure of his teacher, Nangongja, but at this moment, Nangongja no longer had the steady and unpredictable spirit that he usually had in front of him. Instead, he fell into the arms of Aogi Altar Lord, Old Man Aoki. Old Man Aoki's state was also very weak at the moment. If Sasuke's guess was right, then his teacher, Blood Cloak Pavilion's head, Nangongja, should have suffered extremely serious injuries. Old Man Aoki used his own vigorous internal strength to continuously transmit it into Nangongja's body, barely maintaining Nangongja's vitality. How is this possible? Just like how Naruto fell into great grief when he saw his father being besieged by the crowd, Uchiha Sasuke also found it very difficult to accept when he saw his powerful teacher become like this at the moment. Seeing such a scene, Sasuke no longer had the thought of competing with Naruto to see whose idea was more correct. Because people who couldn't even protect the things they wanted to protect, how could they be qualified to talk about their ideals? I must go to the battlefield and wake up Nangong-sensei. After seeing Nangongja's situation, Uchiha Sasuke immediately decided to end the current battle and go back to rescue his teacher. After seeing his father in such a dangerous situation, Naruto naturally no longer insisted on competing with Sasuke, but wanted to immediately go back to the battlefield to rescue his father. At the same time, the two people's hearts sprouted the thought of retreating at the same time. In this turbid space where black and white blended, there was also an irresistible repulsive force that directly forced Naruto and Sasuke's consciousness out of such a space, allowing them to return to their bodies. In the turbid space, Naruto and Sasuke had already retreated when they saw the situation on the battlefield. Now that they had regained control of their bodies, they naturally dissipated the various attack methods they used, preparing to save the strength in their bodies to go back to protect their father and sensei, who were very important to them. And just after the two of them withdrew their attacks, they were surprised to find that the chakra in their body that had been exhausted before had unexpectedly directly returned to their peak state at this moment. Chapter 759. Although Naruto and Sasuke didn't know why their bodies suddenly recovered completely, it must have something to do with entering the black and white chaotic space. It was too late to care about these things. After all, recovering their strength wasn't a bad thing for Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke and Naruto didn't hesitate. The moment they got control of their bodies, they rushed towards the battlefield. Both of them chose to strengthen their speed in various ways. Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan and 6 Tomo Rinnegan in Sasuke's eyes rotated wildly. A large amount of eye power wrapped in chakra directly covered Uchiha Sasuke's body. The purple energy formed a huge rib on Sasuke's body, and behind the rib, a pair of huge wings condensed by chakra also quickly formed. Because of the upgrade of his eyes, Sasuke's control of his power became more and more precise. Just like now, when he used Susanoo, he only summoned two parts, the rib and the wings. The rib and himself were connected as a channel to transmit his will and energy, and the wings appeared behind him as a tool for flight. Although the combination of rib and wings didn't look so beautiful, Sasuke himself was a practical person. Just summoning the rib and wings was actually a way to greatly reduce his own consumption. Sasuke was very clear that as long as he arrived at the battlefield, he would face countless enemies. At this time, he had to ensure that he had enough fighting power, and he also had to do his best to rush to his teacher Nangong's side to help him. It was precisely because of this need that Sasuke used Susanoo like this. Watching Sasuke spread his huge wings behind him and soar in the sky, Naruto's heart inevitably became a little anxious. After all, Sasuke belonged to the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp. Once Sasuke returned to the battlefield, he would naturally do his best to help the Blood Cloak Pavilion. If Sasuke came to the battlefield earlier than him, he would definitely cause great danger to his father. Naruto's relationship with Sasuke was indeed very good, but his father and Sasuke didn't have much interaction. Although he didn't know the truth about the Uchiha clan's destruction, he already knew that it was done by the people of Woodleaf Village. Sasuke didn't have a good impression of Woodleaf Village. Now his father's life was also on the line waiting for rescue. Once Sasuke came to the battlefield earlier, he might harvest his father's life with his current relatively complete strength. It was about his biological father who was related to him by blood. Naturally, it was impossible for Naruto to pin everything on the illusory possibility, so he must do his best to reach the battlefield with Sasuke, or even earlier than Sasuke. Sasuke needed to conserve chakra, but Naruto didn't need it. When he and Sasuke joined forces to absorb all the energy in Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, although it seemed that the power of Bijou had returned to the world or was directly consumed as the energy to supply Rikudo Chibaku Tensei. But in fact, the 9 Bijou zone will entered Naruto's body at the same time as Otsutsuki Kagaya was sealed. Although there was no way to support Naruto to enter Rikudo mode because of the massive consumption of Bijou's power, Bijou chakra with the 9 Bijous was also constantly getting stronger at this moment, enough to support Naruto to enter Kurama mode. Naruto mobilized a large number of Bijou chakra. In the process of running quickly, he also closed his eyes and drew the natural energy around him into his body. That's right, the natural energy that should only be absorbed in a state of absolute stillness can now be absorbed while moving because of the evolution of Naruto's physique. In other words, the current Naruto can completely rely on his physique advantage to stay in Sage mode for a long time. Kurama mode and Sage mode were displayed at the same time. At this moment, Naruto's body was also covered by the golden chakra flame. The golden chakra flame turned into a silk thread and directly weaved a set of gorgeous clothes on Naruto's body. Naruto opened his eyes at this moment. His pupils had turned orange with a slight golden luster, and the center became a very strange cross-shaped eye shape. Sengoku mode. A large number of Sengoku chakra mixed with Bijou chakra constantly condensed in Naruto's body. Naruto directly used this energy to form 4 huge feet behind him. Although the 4 feet were condensed behind Naruto's back, they directly extended to the ground, running directly on the ground like animals. However, compared to Sasuke's almost delicate control of chakra, Naruto's own control ability was relatively weaker. Some chakra still escaped and formed a huge fox phantom. Huge ribs and wings soared in the sky, and a huge demon fox with solid limbs but an unusually illusory body ran on the ground. Susanu's huge wings with boundless sharpness directly broke through the air that was hindering its flying speed. The demon fox incarnation directly relied on its 4 limbs to constantly run on the ground, and everything that was hindering its advance was directly smashed into pieces by the huge power of the demon fox incarnation. Although Naruto and Sasuke deliberately avoided the place where the 2 armies fought in the previous battle, after all, the battle had not been going on for a long time. Naruto and Sasuke were actually not far from the battlefield. With Naruto and Sasuke running with all their strength, the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion and the ninja allied forces on the battlefield naturally saw the figures of Naruto and Sasuke. Although these 2 people were not very old, and were even very young compared to most people on the battlefield, but as the leader of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, the disciple of Shinobi World's Yama, and the child of Yondaime Hokage and Golden Flash, their identity, background, and personal strength were still recognized by everyone. After seeing the 2 people quickly approaching the battlefield, the ninja allied forces and the Blood Cloak Pavilion were also looking forward to their own geniuses to replace their fathers and continue to create a new future, so that their forces can gain an advantage in the battle. Chapter 760. Father. Sensei. When Naruto and Sasuke's eyes could see the battlefield, they began to look for the people who were very important to them. With their amazing eyesight, they quickly found Nangongja, who was lying on the ground in the arms of Old Man Aoki, and Namake's Minato, who was in danger under the siege of the Blood Robe Pavilion and could die at any time. Seeing the people who were very important to them become like this at this moment, whether it was Naruto or Sasuke, their hearts were filled with endless anger at this moment, and the most obvious manifestation was their loud roar and sudden acceleration. The Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan and 6 Tomo Rinnegan in Sasuke's eyes rotated at high speed, and a large amount of eye power and chakra directly emerged from Sasuke's body, directly mending the ribs and wings of Susanoo. The heavy Crow Tengu armor and 2 chakra condensed chakra directly appeared on Susanoo's body and hands. Sasuke-sama. Chief Nangong still has a glimmer of life at this moment. Old Man Aoki is trying his best to awaken Nangong's consciousness. As long as Chief Nangong's consciousness awakens from the chaos, he can quickly recover with his own strength and Old Man Aoki's assistance. After seeing Sasuke directly joining the battle, and sensing an extremely powerful aura from Sasuke's body, Bishui, who was the closest to Nangongju among the 5 elements altar lords, directly used her internal strength to tell Sasuke about the situation at the moment. Although Sasuke didn't have any sense of belonging to Blood Cloth Pavilion, Sasuke still had some understanding of Bishui, the altar lord of Blood Cloth Pavilion who was very loyal to his sensei. After hearing that his sensei needed time, he immediately made a plan in his heart. The huge complete body Susanoo directly rushed towards the location of the allied ninja forces, who were engaged in a battle with the outer defense formation of Blood Cloth Pavilion. With his ability to fly, Uchiha Sasuke directly controlled the complete body Susanoo to float in the sky to ensure that ordinary ninjutsu couldn't attack him. Then the chakra in his body stirred up a lot, and he and Susanoo formed different hand signs to prepare for the attack. Sasuke's timing was very good. The 6 Kage-level powerhouses in the allied ninja forces, including Jiraiya, Orochimaru, Tsunade, Gaara, Terumi Mei, and A, were fighting against the Thick Earth Altar's Thick Earth Breaking formation at this moment because of the fearless attack of the Thick Earth Altar's disciples and Thick Earth himself. When he saw Uchiha Sasuke floating above the allied ninja forces and constantly gathering power, Thick Earth, as the commander of the formation, immediately began to direct the Thick Earth Altar's ninja to directly entangle the 6 Kage-level powerhouses at all costs. Although the average ninja in the allied ninja forces also has good strength, there is still a huge gap between them and Uchiha Sasuke, whose body has evolved into 6-path-in body and cast the complete version of Susanoo. Sometimes the gap in strength can't be made up by quantity. The chakra in Sasuke's body continued to flow into Susanoo's body, and a part of chakra was left in his body by Sasuke to cooperate with Susanoo to cast ninjutsu. Katand Super Dragon Fire Jutsu. The original Dragon Fire Jutsu was only a huge flame dragon head when it was cast, but at this moment, because Sasuke poured a huge amount of chakra into it, the original huge dragon head also became extended and directly turned into a whole flame dragon rushing directly into the sky. The huge flame dragon rushed directly out of Susanoo's body and rushed into the sky, forming a magnificent scene, making the battle in the entire battlefield seem to have a trace of stagnation. As Uchiha Sasuke's best friend, others don't know what ninjutsu Sasuke is using, but Naruto is very clear about it and knows how powerful this ninjutsu is. At this moment, Sasuke is directly using Susanoo's huge body and the powerful blessing ability of ninjutsu to cast such a large-scale attack ninjutsu that is enough to rank in the top few among the ninjutsu that Sasuke can master. Naruto can't imagine what kind of casualties such a ninjutsu will cause if it falls into the many ninjas of the allied ninja forces. Glancing at his father, who was still besieged by many disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Naruto's eyes showed a tangled look. After all, he is the only one who can fight against Sasuke at this moment. If he wants to save the many ninjas of the allied ninja forces, he naturally needs his own ability. In the same way, his father is constantly attacked by countless strong ninjas at this moment. At this moment, it seems that he has been relying on his own will and instinct to persist. No one knows how long this situation will last. Once he wastes a lot of time and consumes a lot of power to save the many ninjas of the allied ninja forces, can he still save his father with a little effort like now? At this moment, Naruto is caught in a competition between public and private interests. Should he give up a small number of people for the sake of the majority, or follow his own inner desire to do what he wants to do? Such a question, even the wisest man in the world may not be able to give an answer, let alone a young child like Uzumaki Naruto. However, Naruto's heart can be tangled, but the speed of Sasuke's attack will not decrease in the slightest. Susanoo's constantly forming hand seals finally stopped at this moment, and a large number of chakra was directly extracted from Uchiha Sasuke's body, and a purple thunder condensed directly in Susanoo's hand. Although it was different from Nangong's black thunder, the same powerful destructive aura still came out from it. Uchiha Sasuke's face became a little pale at this moment because of the large number of chakra output, but Sasuke's eyes were particularly determined, and he didn't have any change in expression because he was about to kill hundreds of powerful ninjas. Uchiha Sasuke pursues the path of evil spirits in this world, and killing Uchiha Sasuke is no pressure at all. Divine Beast Patrol, Kirin descends. Susanoo Raitun Kirin. Chapter 761. Dark clouds shrouded the sky. From time to time, rumbling sounds of thunder could be heard from within the dark clouds. Occasionally, a few rays of light would flicker within the dark clouds and emit a terrifying aura. This caused everyone to feel fear and reverence, as if the heavens were enraged. Sasuke's eyes were full of frost, it seems that even his soul and his will have been completely frozen. As long as he can achieve his goal, Sasuke can completely seal all his emotions and not let them affect him. Sasuke's own plan is to break the original order of ninja world and establish an ideal world where everyone can restrain their evil thoughts. The establishment of such a world inevitably requires conflict with the maintainers of the old order, ninja. Therefore, the elimination of a large number of ninjas is an unavoidable process for Sasuke to achieve his plan. As long as Sasuke still insists on his beliefs, then whether it is in the future or now, he must harden his heart, otherwise, it will be a stain on his will. Go, through the connection between the purple thunder in Susanu's hand and the dark clouds in the sky, Sasuke also constantly felt the huge power brewing in the dark clouds. After feeling that such power has reached the extreme at this moment, Sasuke also directly controlled Susanoo to wave the hand wrapped in purple thunder, and directed the huge power directly to the ninja coalition army on the ground. The purple thunder was like a chain, directly dragging a large group of thunder and lightning out of the dark clouds. Unlike the ordinary version of Raitun, Kirin, that Sasuke had originally used, this group of thunder and lightning at this moment was much larger, and there was a lot of thunder and lightning that had been assimilated into purple thunder and lightning wandering around in it, adding a bit of majesty and dignity to the blue-white thunder and lightning Kirin behemoth. Roar! Obviously, it was just a product of thunder and lightning, but the blue-purple thunder and lightning entangled Kirin directly roared at the sky. The roar was like a golden spear and a yellow bell, and for a while, it directly resounded through the sky and drilled into everyone's ears. When people with slightly lower strength heard Kirin's roar, they directly fell into a sluggish state and couldn't move. It seemed that this roar was venting all the anger and injustice caused by all the filth of time, and then directly swept over the living beings under him with ruthless eyes, and then directly rushed down the purple lightning chain in the hand of Susanoo that was connected to him. Many ninjas of the ninja allied forces looked at the blue and purple Chilin, and most of their legs began to tremble at this moment. After all, when they fought with Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, and Kagaya Otsutsuki before, such a high-level battle is not something that ordinary ninjas can participate in. Although they have seen the huge power erupting when the super-strong fight from a distance, after all, it didn't happen to them. Most of the ninjas of the ninja allied forces were not mentally prepared for such a battle. The blue-purple Chilin was getting closer and closer to many ninjas of the ninja allied forces, and the majestic face of Kirin was constantly magnified in the eyes of many ninjas of the ninja allied forces. Many ninjas of the ninja allied forces have closed their eyes and quietly waited for such a thing that they have no way to resist. This is not fear, but pure powerlessness. Just when everyone was waiting for their bodies to be ravaged by lightning, then lose consciousness and then lose their lives, after a violent tremor on the ground, nothing seemed to happen. The ninjas of the ninja allied forces opened their originally closed eyes and saw a huge golden fox in front of them. Black lines were drawn on the fox's body, and a shield condensed by a large number of chakra directly isolated the countless lightning bolts. Although the shield seemed to be a bit shaky under the impact of the lightning, the demon fox incarnation was still constantly transmitting a large number of chakra to the shield to maintain the shield from being broken. When he saw the demon fox incarnation directly appear in the ninja allied forces, Sasuke immediately looked at the place where Yondaime Hokage, Naruto's father, Namake's Watergate, was surrounded by many ninjas of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Because no matter what, Sasuke couldn't believe that Naruto could really give up his father so decisively. Beside Namake's Watergate, a figure with a golden chakra coat also appeared at this moment. This person was none other than Namake's Watergate's child, Uzumaki Naruto. Did he use Shadow Clone Jutsu? Seeing two figures of Naruto suddenly appear on the battlefield, Sasuke's heart also slightly understood what kind of situation it was. Naruto was still the Naruto he knew in the beginning. When faced with a dilemma and people had to make a choice, Naruto would often give an answer that no one expected. Although the power gathered together can exert the greatest effect, Naruto's current goal is not to defeat or destroy anything, but just to protect the things he wants to protect. Compared to attack, as long as the right method is found for defense, then it can naturally achieve its goal with less consumption. Therefore, Naruto directly used Shadow Clone Jutsu to let his clone carry a large number of Bijuu chakra and condense the Demon Fox incarnation to protect the ninja allied forces from Sasuke's powerful attack. His own body directly relied on his own huge chakra and the unpredictable power of Senjutsu chakra to rush into the enemy's formation to rescue his father who was besieged. Hey! Naruto boy, hurry up and save your father. Although I can barely hold on here, we must not consume too much energy. From the mouth of the Demon Fox incarnation above the ninja allied forces, Naruto's arrogant and low voice came out directly. At this moment, the Demon Fox incarnation was actually controlled by Kyuubi's consciousness. As the strongest existence among the nine-tailed beasts, Kurama's time in Kyuubi's body was relatively short, and his strength was the fastest to recover. At this moment, Kurama was able to use his ability to help Naruto fight. Chapter 762. Hearing Kurama's shout, Uzumaki Naruto, who was in the middle of the Blood Cloak Pavilion's attack, also felt the pressure. He didn't enter such an attack, he couldn't understand how terrible it was just by looking at it with his eyes. However, when Naruto directly entered the Water-Fire Duality Battle Formation, formed by the Azure Altar and the Scarlet Flame Altar of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, he felt the two forces of water and fire raging in his body. Even Naruto's body, which had been transformed by the power of 6 paths of Yang, felt great discomfort. Naruto looked back at his father, who was standing behind him and seemed to have fallen into a state of madness. He was constantly fighting against the two altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Bisui and Akaji. The two forces of water and fire invaded his body again and again, but he still kept attacking. Naruto's eyes flashed with a trace of admiration. Although Naruto had powerful strength, his father was still far superior to him in terms of temperament and will. It seemed that he had to be ruthless. Now Naruto was very clear that once a large amount of water and fire energy accumulated in his body would involuntarily be entangled by the Water-Fire Duality Battle Formation formed by the Azure Altar and the Scarlet Flame Altar. There was no chance for him to escape. Therefore, he must immediately use thunderous means to break the Water-Fire Duality Battle Formation before he was completely trapped in it. Only in this way could he have a chance to take his father away safely. Although Naruto did not have much tailed beast chakra in his body at the moment, the amount of chakra in his body was extremely large. A large number of chakra gathered in his palm under the control of Naruto. His body tensed up. It was obvious that he was going to rely on his physical strength to fight the Azure Altar and the Scarlet Flame Altar of the Blood Cloth Pavilion directly. Immortal Art, Frog Gauntlet. Although Frog Gauntlet was only a sea-level ninjutsu, its power and range of application far exceeded the limit of ordinary sea-level ninjutsu. When Naruto instilled a large amount of chakra in his palm, the power of Frog Gauntlet skyrocketed. Naruto's Sage Mode and Bijuu Mode superimposed together to form a X-shaped eye. Although it's not as good as the Byakugan and Sharingan, which are Kekkai Genkai from the bloodline, its ability to capture the dynamic world and its perception is far beyond ordinary eyes. Soon, with the help of his dynamic vision, Naruto had basically figured out the operation mode of the Water-Fire Duality Battle Formation. As a battle formation, the Water-Fire Duality Battle Formation itself was not that complicated. After all, the power of hundreds of internal force practitioners was gathered in one body. Such an existence did not need to use so many methods to confuse the opponent. This kind of battle formation was also a battle formation that exerted the offensive power of water and fire to the extreme. It could be regarded as a disguised form of attack instead of defense. It did not have much defensive ability. Naruto clenched his right fist and placed it on his waist. Although there was no obvious movement of accumulating power, he concentrated his power into his fist at his waist at the moment, ready to strike at any time. Hit! Seeing the operation of the battle formation, Naruto immediately punched out with his fist that had been accumulating power for a long time. At this moment, because of the operation of the battle formation, Akame Yen, who had the most outstanding offensive ability in the battle formation, appeared right in front of Naruto. As a person who had been immersed in battle for many years, Akame Yen had already seen through Naruto's fist technique when he was accumulating power. Therefore, when Naruto punched him, Akame Yen did not panic at all. Instead, he directly jumped up and distanced himself from Naruto. Just when Akame Yen thought that he had dodged Naruto's attack and was about to attack Naruto, who had not yet recovered from the attack, a fist mark suddenly appeared on Akame Yen's abdomen. For some reason, Akame Yen, who was hit by the huge fist force, took a few steps back. Not only did Akame Yen suffer a certain injury, but more importantly, because of Akame Yen's sudden retreat, there were some flaws in the water-fire yin-yang battle formation. Seeing the flaws in the battle formation, Naruto directly came to his father's side and released his aura so that Windstorm Watergate, who was in an instinctive state, would not react to his approach. Then he directly took his father's hand and led him towards the flaws in the water-fire yin-yang battle formation. Those who stop me will die. Looking at the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion in front of him, Naruto showed the huge power contained in his body, trying to deter the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion in this way and reduce his consumption as much as possible. After seeing the huge aura erupting from Naruto's body, many of the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion instinctively took a few steps back. However, after retreating, the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion directly rushed towards Naruto's position again without fear of death. Now that the internal force cultivators and ninjas had fallen out, once they lost this battle and failed to save Nangongja's life, the Blood Cloak Pavilion would be like a fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Dying early or dying late would be a dead end. In this case, it was better to fight desperately now, and maybe there would be more changes. Seeing the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion rushing towards him again after being deterred by his aura, Naruto did not hesitate at all. Although he only used one hand, he gave full play to his immortal method, Frog Hand. Under Naruto's control, the natural energy condensed into invisible fists and palms, attacking the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. However, Naruto obviously did not kill them. After the fists and palms came into contact with the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, they immediately invaded the disciples' bodies and sealed their meridians, making it impossible for them to exert their strength. They could only fall to the ground powerlessly. Then, they tried to break through the attack formation inside the Blood Cloak Pavilion with their father. Under Naruto's constant attacks, the formation became shaky, and the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion had to divert their attention to protect Nangongja, who was also in a coma inside the formation. This undoubtedly limited the strength of the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. First, there was the threat of Naruto breaking through the formation, and now there was the need to protect Nangongja. The disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion were quite stretched for a while. Chapter 763. In the end, even though the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion fought with all their might, they still had to defend against Naruto's attack and ensure the safety of Nangongja at the same time. They couldn't continue to control Bofeng and Watergate in the formation. Naruto's Odama Rasengan directly bombarded a disciple of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Several disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion were also sent flying by the Odama Rasengan. Naruto's huge power directly blasted a big hole in the formation set up by the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Naruto took Bofeng and Watergate and used Body Flicker to escape from the hole in the formation. Damn it! Chase after them. We can't let them escape. Otherwise, all the sacrifices we made will be for naught. Seeing Naruto and Watergate rush out of the formation, Chi Yen, who was one of the masters of the defensive formation and had his meridians sealed by Naruto's attack, immediately issued an order to the disciples of the Scarlet Flame Altar under his command. After seeing Chi Yan's angry order to the disciples of the Scarlet Flame Altar, Bisui immediately came to Chi Yan's side and said to the Scarlet Flame Altar's messenger, "Alright, your altar master is currently in a rage and can't make a rational decision. Don't be in such a hurry to carry out the order. Wait for me to have a good discussion with your altar master before taking action. Understand?" As the altar master of the Clearwater altar, Bisui couldn't directly give orders to the disciples of the Scarlet Flame altar. However, as a disciple of the Scarlet Flame altar, the messenger naturally understood his altar master's character very well. Scarlet Flame had done a lot of impulsive things due to his anger. Although Scarlet Flame had become a little better under Nangong's guidance, a leopard couldn't change its spots. Scarlet Flame's nature couldn't be changed. Now that the altar master of the Jade Water altar was standing in front of Scarlet Flame didn't need to pass on the order given by the angry Scarlet Flame. As the messenger disciple, Scarlet Flame was relieved. However, this messenger disciple was still a disciple of the Scarlet Flame altar. Although he didn't think that his altar lord's orders were worth carrying out, he still had to wait for his altar lord's orders. Therefore, this messenger disciple stood beside Scarlet Flame and Bai Shui and didn't dare to move. Seeing that his disciple didn't carry out his order at this moment, Qi Yan's anger became even more violent. His internal strength was agitated due to the fluctuation of his emotions. His red hair swayed like flames due to the agitation of his internal strength. It constantly showed that Qi Yan's emotions were unstable. Bisui, what do you mean by this? Although you and I are both 5 elements altar masters and have the same rank, you don't have the right to command my disciples. Hearing Qi Yan's merciless reprimand, Bisui didn't get angry like Qi Yan. Instead, she looked at Qi Yan calmly like a clear spring. After enduring Bishui's gaze for a while, Qi Yan couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. The Bisui altar was in charge of assassination and intelligence work in the Blood Cloth Pavilion. As the altar master of the Bisui altar, Bisui could be said to be the person who knew the most secrets in the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Although Bai Shui looked like a gentle woman on the outside, as one of the 5 elemental altar lords, Scarlet Flame knew how hard Bai Shui's heart was. Now that Bai Shui was looking at him with a calm gaze, it was as if she was looking at a toy, cold and emotionless. Scarlet Flame immediately understood that he had angered Bai Shui. However, as the altar master of the Scarlet Flame altar, Qi Yan couldn't lose face in front of his disciple. Therefore, he could only endure the chill in his heart and continue to stare at Bisui. Seeing Qi Yan trying to show off in front of her, Bishui's originally angry mood slowly calmed down. After all, they had worked together for many years. Bai Shui was also very clear about Scarlet Flame's bad temper. Bickering with such a boorish man over such trivial matters would make her seem a little too petty, right? Now, what we should be worried about is whether or not we have directly left the life of the 4th fire shadow, Bo Feng, Watergate here. I think you should be very clear about what we should be worried about, Qi Yan. After saying that, Bisui glanced in the direction of Nangongzhe. Bai Shui's glance also caused Scarlet Flame's stubborn personality to turn around. Scarlet Flame was originally a reckless man, and he didn't have much scheming in his heart. When Nangongzhe, an outsider, first came to the Blood Cloth Pavilion to take over the position of head, Qi Yan was also used as a tool by Rui Jin. However, when Nangongzhe used his own strength to save the Blood Cloth Pavilion from danger, Qi Yan also directly gave his loyalty to Nangongzhe. Now that Nangongzhe was in danger, although Qi Yan was very angry, he was still one of the 5 elements altar masters of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Qi Yan had to be responsible for his identity. Therefore, after Qi Yan understood Bishui's meaning, the anger in his heart was forcibly suppressed by Qi Yan. The internal strength in his body no longer surged, and Qi Yan's red hair also returned to normal. Seeing that his altar master had regained his composure, the Scarlet Flame altar's disciple, who was the messenger disciple, also breathed a sigh of relief. After all, he had disobeyed his altar master to a certain extent. If his altar master didn't calm down because of Bishui's words, he would be doomed. Pass down my order. After glancing at the Scarlet Flame altar's messenger disciple who was stopped by Bisui, Qi Yan dispelled all the anger in his heart and calmly said to him, all Scarlet Flame altar's disciples will now join the outer defensive formation and help the Deep Earth altar master resist the enemy's attack. Then, divide a group of people to protect the head as he enters the center of the formation. They have the right to protect our head. Also, pass down the order to all disciples that our head is not dead. Although he has some injuries, he is already under the control of the Greenwood Altar Master. As long as the head wakes up, he will be able to recover immediately. Let all Blood Cloth Pavilion's disciples know that we, who are usually protected by the head, will use our own blood to repay the head for protecting and helping the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Chapter 764. Suddenly, Akame Yan's order about Nangong's situation wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Otherwise, as the Altar Lord of Aquamarine Altar would have killed this disciple on the spot to prevent the news from spreading. The reason why several Altar Lords wanted to keep the news that Nangongja still had a chance to survive was for two reasons. First, they couldn't let the ninja allied forces know that Nangongja could still be saved. Otherwise, the ninja allied forces would launch an all-out attack on the Bloodrobe Pavilion and kill Nangongja completely. The second reason was that they hoped to use the fact that Nangongja couldn't be saved to arouse the anger in the hearts of the Bloodrobe Pavilion disciples, forming a desperate army to fight against the ninja allied forces and gain an advantage. But now, because the battle formation was broken, the pressure exerted on the Bloodrobe Pavilion disciples was even greater. Originally, they still had some effect, but now, they might be defeated directly. Therefore, as the Five Elements Altar Lord whose authority in the Blood Cloth Pavilion is second only to Nangongja, Akame directly used his own identity and the name of the 4 Five Elements Altar Lords to directly tell all the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion that Nangongja still has a chance to live. He hopes that this way, he can reignite the fighting spirit of many disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion so that they can work harder to fight against the ninjas of the ninja allied forces. One of the important reasons why Aquamarine didn't stop Akame Yen from issuing the order was that at this moment, the huge protective shield supported by the Demon Fox incarnation inside the ninja allied forces had been directly broken by the powerful power of the Susanoo controlled by Sasuke. In the face of a large-scale attack, once there is a loophole in the defense, then the so-called defense is nothing more than a castle in the air. It is meaningless at all. A large amount of lightning directly invaded the protected ninja allied forces through the loophole, and some of the lightning penetrated the defensive shield and directly invaded the body of the Demon Fox incarnation along the defensive shield. Although Kurama himself is an existence composed of pure fire attribute energy, the prejudice and anger accumulated in his heart towards all living beings has reached the extreme after being in the ninja world for so many years. The so-called appearance is born from the heart, and his own existence will also change due to changes in his mentality. Therefore, the prejudice and malice in Kurama's body also affected the attributes of Nine Tails at this moment. The pure fire attribute was also mixed with a bit of evil. The lightning itself has an extremely strong restraining effect on evil. The purple lightning directly mixed with Kirin and invaded Kurama's body. It also constantly attacked Kurama's body, making him unable to concentrate his will to control the defensive shield, and then more lightning invaded the inside of the shield and Kirin's body, Kurama's body, forming a vicious cycle. At this moment, the ninjas of the ninja allied forces inside the defensive shield were actually suffering heavy casualties. Except for the 6 Kage-tier ninjas who could barely protect themselves from such an attack, most of the ninjas were more or less injured. Some of the ninjas were directly turned into charcoal under the attack of the lightning. The ninjas of the ninja allied forces suffered a large number of casualties, and their combat power was extremely reduced. They were even slightly weaker than the Blood Cloth Pavilion, so why didn't the Blood Cloth Pavilion take advantage of such an opportunity to directly boost the morale of the entire Blood Cloth Pavilion, let the ninja allied forces suffer greater losses, and buy more time for Nangongja to recover? Soon, Akame's order was directly passed to the ears of every Blood Cloth Pavilion disciple through the disciples at all levels. When every Blood Cloth Pavilion disciple heard that their leader Nangongja was still alive, their hearts were full of excitement. After all, Nangongja had repeatedly used his actions to tell the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion that he was the one who could truly lead the Blood Cloth Pavilion to the peak. When the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion knew that their leader, who was like a guiding light, still had a glimmer of hope, it was tantamount to floating in a torrent. Suddenly, a life-saving straw appeared in front of them, and all they could do was to hold this big straw tightly and tell themselves that this straw could definitely save their lives. For the leader. For the Blood Cloth Pavilion. For the future of internal strength cultivators. As the most bold and unrestrained person among the 5 elements altar masters, and the one who was best at stirring up the atmosphere, at this moment, Akame directly held his great blade to a relatively high place, and used his internal strength to support his throat, so that he could make a louder voice, and shouted these 3 sentences to everyone in the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Then, he immediately took the lead and directly jumped into the battle. Fight! 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 Every Blood Cloth Pavilion disciple began to silently roar in their hearts, because there was only one thing they could do at this moment: fight. They had to fight desperately, throw all their uneasiness to the back of their minds, and fight with all their might for the future they had hoped for. If they lost their arms, they would use their teeth to bite; if they lost their legs, they would use their bodies to move forward; if they lost their heads, they would leave their fighting spirit here for everyone to see. The brave, the chi. Where the chi was, so was the strength. Where the heart was, so was the chi. Therefore, Guwen was brave and encouraged by the heart. Now, the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion were all holding their breaths in their hearts. This breath was like a ball of fire that was contained in the hearts of every Bloodcloak Pavilion disciple, constantly urging every Bloodcloak Pavilion disciple to unleash their full power. Ignite the fire in my heart, burn my enemy. At this moment, the Blood Cloth Pavilion disciples gathered together again, and directly surrounded Nangongja, who was almost like a spiritual sustenance, in the center of the battle formation. Although the 3 elements altar masters, Bai Shui, Akame, and Ho Tu, were more or less injured at this moment, they still tried their best to command the Blood Cloth Pavilion disciples present to fight against the Ninja Coalition army, and to buy time for Nangongja to wake up. Even if every minute and every second was fought for through the blood of their own people, no one had the slightest fear in their hearts. Living was not only about maintaining the vitality of one's body, but more people chose to live through death. Chapter 765. The battle between the ninja allied forces and the Bloodcloak Pavilion had entered a white-hot stage at this moment. Because Naruto and Sasuke, the 2 super powerhouses who had fully recovered their strength, directly joined the battlefield, bringing many new changes to the battlefield. The most obvious change was that the ninja allied forces and the Bloodcloak Pavilion had some problems on both sides. Because of Naruto's rescue, Namake's Watergate, who was controlled by the Bloodcloak Pavilion, was also brought back to the ninja allied forces camp. The ninja allied forces themselves had suffered great casualties because of Uchiha and Sasuke's powerful attack, and their combat power was greatly reduced. However, under the joint attack of the Scarlet Flame Altar and Aquamarine Altar of the Bloodcloak Pavilion, the 4th Hokage, Namake's Watergate himself, after being brought to a relatively safe place by Naruto, immediately couldn't tighten his nerves and directly fainted. After all, Namake's Watergate's identity was different from the average ninja. To a certain extent, he represented the existence of the wood leaf. As one of the wood leaf ninjas, Tsunade, who was the most skilled healer in the ninja allied forces and was also one of the Sannin, had to leave the battle circle and come to Namake's Watergate's side to help him stabilize the situation. Nangongja and Namake's Watergate, the 2 people who were the representatives of the Bloodcloak Pavilion and the ninja allied forces to attack each other at the beginning, now both of them fell into a coma. It could be regarded as another kind of fate, right? However, Watergate's situation was still slightly better than Nangongja's. After all, Watergate's physical and spiritual power were overdrawn too severely. As long as he received reasonable treatment, there would be no root cause of the disease. On the contrary, Nangong's fainting at the moment was not because of the problem of consumption, but because of the problem of his kendo will. The Book of Martial Arts said, sword, double-edged body, straight head, can hurt people horizontally and vertically, piercing through armor. It was extremely dangerous and was born to kill. As a double-edged weapon, the sword was more versatile than some single-edged weapons when it was used subtly, but once it was used incorrectly, it would hurt the user before hurting the enemy. Although it seemed that Nangongja had a ninja career for a period of time, unlike those ninjas who were good at carrying out assassinations or even some missions that went against the natural order, most of Nangongja's missions were head-on games on the battlefield or confrontations with the strong. Although he was in a ninja world where people would do anything to achieve their goals, Nangongja still carefully protected his heart. Almost every time he carried out a mission, he would go home and meditate for a period of time so that his heart would not be shrouded by the filth of the outside world. Because Nangongja knew better than anyone that once his heart became impure, then how could his sword skills be exquisite? But this time, for his own plan, for the development of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, and for the future of countless internal force practitioners, Nangongja personally crossed the bottom line that he had set for himself and began to use some underhanded moves to fight for his own interests. Perhaps many people would say that every man for himself and the devil takes the hindmost. In order to fight for enough benefits for oneself, so what if it crossed one's bottom line slightly? In any case, the bottom line could always be lowered again and again. If there was really a day when it could no longer be lowered, then it would be better to just give up on such a useless thing. But as a warrior and as a swordsman, often what was useless in the eyes of others was a rule that he had to abide by. This rule was the scabbard that bound his sharp sword. Once the scabbard was broken, a long sword without a scabbard and a swordsman without restrictions would lose its own spirituality and could only become a simple killing tool. It was precisely because of this that Nangongja fell into a coma due to his sword heart agitation. All of this was because Nangongja instinctively restrained himself. Otherwise, how could a few words from Watergate have the power to directly push Nangongja into a coma? In fact, Nangongja's consciousness did not disappear at this moment. On the contrary, he was very clear-headed. Relying on his powerful mental strength, Nangongja could almost see the entire situation on the battlefield with his eyes. Nangongja saw the bloody battle of the thick earth altar, the exquisite cooperation of the scarlet flame altar and the clear water altar, and the acute gold altar and the green wood altar moving around in all directions. However, these delightful situations still couldn't hide the fact that the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion had suffered heavy losses at this moment. According to Nangongja's original plan, when the two sides exhausted to a certain extent, Nangongja would directly take many disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion and directly retreat to the Lion Clan's different space, and use the Lion Clan's different space as a springboard to return to the headquarters of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. After that, Nangongja would directly command the small countries under his control to directly form the Small Countries Alliance and declare war on the 5 major countries in the name of their country. Because most of the powerful ninjas of the 5 major countries were transferred away by the ninja allied forces, and the political leaders of the 5 major countries were also protected in a secret place by the ninja allied forces at this moment, there was no way for them to return to their own countries. At this moment, the ninjas of the Blood Cloth Pavilion were constantly attacking, and the miscellaneous troops of the small countries were taking over the cities captured by the Blood Cloth Pavilion. They wanted to capture the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth as quickly as possible and directly control half of the shinobi world. However, such a plan directly fell into a quagmire at this moment because of Nangongja's accidental coma. Even now, even if Nangongja could really wake up immediately and perhaps change such a war with his own strength, it would be difficult to carry out the final plan of swallowing the 2 countries and dividing the world. At this moment, Nangongja was not only restraining himself because his behavior violated the bottom line that he set for himself, but also because of his excessive trust in himself and his obstinance, which caused the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion to suffer heavy losses. Even now, in order to protect himself, he had to confront the ninja allied forces head-on, which was constantly expanding the damage. Strong sadness and self-blame shrouded Nangong's heart. Even Nangong's body, which could no longer be controlled, slightly frowned because of such emotions. Seeing that Nangongje actually had a javelin transformation, Aoki, who had been staying beside Nangongje and constantly injecting internal energy into Nangongje's body, suddenly showed a trace of joy. Chapter 766. Although Old Man Qingmu was not an internal energy cultivator who specialized in swordsmanship, he was the oldest among the 5 element altar masters. He was also the most experienced elder of the Blood Garment Pavilion. He had his own understanding of Nangongje's current situation. Although Nangongje had gathered together for various reasons and coincidentally triggered Nangongje's mental isolation, in essence, it was because Nangongje could not control himself and was unwilling to face reality directly. Although Nangongje's expression did not change much, it was still noticeable. Frowning might not be a good emotion, but at least it proved that there was something that could stimulate Nangongje, allowing Nangongje's emotions to break through the restraint that Nangongje had on his own will. As long as Elder Qingmu could stimulate Nangongje's will to a certain extent, then everything could be reversed. At this moment, Nangongje had actually fallen into an endless loop that he had set for himself. This did not mean that Nangongje was an inflexible person. Instead, it was because everyone's thinking was limited. No one was perfect. Even a normal person would inevitably make a lot of mistakes in their daily life, let alone a leader who had to deal with a lot of affairs every day and ensure that his strength would steadily improve and even surpass most people. My lord. I know you can hear me now. I am Qingmu, the altar master of the Greenwood altar. Qingmu attached his internal energy to his throat. Unlike Nangongje and Qi Yan who used their internal energy to amplify their voices, Qingmu used his internal energy to vibrate his throat constantly, giving his voice a strange charm. His voice rushed directly into Nangongje's ears with a special wave. Although Nangongje had weakened his 5 senses and could only hear some noises, Qingmu's voice was like a knife that directly pierced through all obstacles and rushed into Nangongje's mind. Qing Mu? Nangongje, who was immersed in his own mind, suddenly heard Qingmu's voice clearly. He was slightly stunned. After all, even Nangongje could not break free from his self-imposed isolation. When he suddenly heard Qingmu's voice, Nangongje naturally hoped that Qingmu, a veteran of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, would have a way to solve the problem that was happening to him. My lord, are you still not waking up? Although I don't particularly understand what kind of plan you have in mind, but this kind of situation where almost all the elite disciples of the Blood Clothing Pavilion have been exhausted is definitely not something that you have expected. Although Qingmu's words did not directly reprimand Nangongje, his tone was rather stiff. Obviously, he was quite upset. When Nangongje first came to the Blood Cloak Pavilion, it was Qingmu who first accepted Nangongje as the successor of the banishment, the master of the Heavenly Calamity Sword, and the future head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Even when the other 5 elements altar masters wanted Nangongje to take the Dragon Transformation Road test, Qingmu himself was biased towards Nangongje. Now that the most senior and most stable person in the Blood Cloak Pavilion had begun to resent Nangongje, what kind of attitude would the other people in the Blood Cloak Pavilion have towards Nangongje? Nangongje could not help but begin to worry. Although he was very confident that he had recruited many disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion over the years, and he could vaguely sense that the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion were fighting a bloody battle, Nangongje could not help but begin to doubt himself after hearing Qingmu's words. He was worried that his many years of effort and management would directly go to waste because of this mistake. The reason why Nangongje suddenly had such a psychological change was that Nangongje was currently in an endless loop of his own thoughts. All the words that entered Nangongje's mind would be forcibly put into his own endless loop by Nangongje. Then, he would use this endless loop to attack himself. However, the more important reason was the sound technique that Qingmu used at this moment. This technique was not very common in the Blood Cloak Pavilion. It was a special attack called demonic sound. However, it was only useful when the opponent's mental state was extremely weak, or when there was an obvious flaw in the opponent's mental state. This kind of weak ability was particularly difficult to use. If one was not careful, the meridians in the neck would be damaged. If it was more serious, it could even directly take the user's life. Qing Mu had accidentally found such a secret book in the Blood Cloak Pavilion's library. With his extremely strong recovery ability and his extremely steady character, he slowly honed this demonic sound while constantly suffering from minor injuries. Now that Nangongzhe was in a state of self-doubt, Qing Mu naturally directly used the demonic sound to directly trigger the flaw in Nangongzhe's mind, causing Nangongzhe to doubt himself again. It's not that I don't want to go out. It's not that I don't want to. Even though Nangongzhe was in the mental world, his eyes directly turned scarlet, and even his body became distorted. Suddenly, the originally pitch-black mental world suddenly emitted a popping sound, which was like a bubble bursting. It was enough to show how excited Nangongzhe was at this moment. However, Qing Mu, who was in the outside world, could not see the changes in Nangongzhe's mental world. He could only see Nangongzhe's constantly changing facial expression. Therefore, Qing Mu naturally thought that his method was effective. He directly used the demonic sound again to invade Nangongzhe's mind, and gave him a strong dose of medicine. Overestimating your so-called cleverness and regarding others as chess pieces in your hands. In the end, you completely fail to see your own weakness. This is unwise. Placing the lives of everyone in the Blood Cloak Pavilion on the scale and directly destroying the future of the internal strength cultivators is disloyal. After encountering difficulties, you only know how to blindly escape. Even at a time like this, you still tightly lock yourself in your own mental world. This is unrighteous. Unwise, disloyal, and unrighteous. What right do you have to sit in the position of the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion? Chapter 767. Most of the time, people would do bad things with good intentions. The reason why Elder Qing Mu said so many words to hurt Nangongzhe's heart was that he wanted to stimulate Nangongzhe so that Nangongzhe could regain control of his body. However, Elder Qing Mu had spent too little time with Nangongzhe. Although he had a certain understanding of Nangongzhe based on his subjective impression, he knew nothing about Nangongzhe's hidden personality. Elder Qing Mu thought that Nangongzhe was tough enough to face all misunderstandings, so he directly said those words to Nangongzhe. If Mashiro, Nangongro, Little Linger, or even Bishui were beside Elder Qing Mu, they would immediately stop Elder Qing Mu's actions. Dragons had a reverse scale, and those who touched it would die. Nangongzhe also had his reverse scale. Those things that Nangongzhe did not care about had no effect on Nangongzhe. However, once Nangongzhe believed that those who trusted him had doubts about him, Nangongzhe would also suffer a great blow. The Blood Cloak Pavilion was such an existence for Nangongzhe. However, Elder Qing Mu had deliberately misled Nangongzhe with his demonic sound, and let this mistake directly pass through Nangongzhe's mind. This cycle of death was even worse. This was not helping Nangongzhe. Instead, it was worsening the accident that happened to Nangongzhe, making Nangongzhe's current state more dangerous. Who is unwise? Who is unfaithful? Who is unrighteous? In Nangongzhe's spiritual world, Nangongzhe fell into a kind of madness because of Elder Qing Mu's demonic sound. This madness made Nangongzhe beat his head with both hands, and his eyes turned red. Crack, a faint but clear sound echoed in Nangongzhe's spiritual world. Nangongzhe's instinctive restraint on himself was directly broken by Nangongzhe's deep madness. On the battlefield, Nangongzhe's body also opened his eyes. However, his black and white eyeballs had turned red and black. This pair of eyes was obviously not something that a normal person could have. Scarlet light shot out from Nangongzhe's opened eyes, and a violent demonic aura emanated from Nangong's body. Not good. Although Elder Qingmu didn't know how wrong he was, he could tell that Nangongja wasn't in a good state. On the contrary, it was extremely similar to the scene that Elder Qingmu had seen when an internal force cultivator turned into a demonic state. Seal. As soon as Elder Qingmu sensed that something was wrong, he directly stimulated all the internal force in his body and directly wrapped it around Nangong's body. The internal force turned into small needles and pierced into Nangong's major acupuncture points. Elder Qingmu was currently using his internal force to guide the violent power in Nangong's body out of Nangong's body. He hoped that this method would prevent the violent internal force from destroying Nangong's body. At the same time, he also wanted to prevent Nangongja from turning into a demonic state and starting a crazy massacre. When Nangongja woke up, there was a big movement. The scarlet light emitted from his eyes directly condensed and rushed into the sky. On the battlefield, whether it was the disciples of the Blood-Robe Pavilion or the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces, they all saw the two beams of light and Nangongja's opened eyes. Seeing that Nangongja had woken up, the disciples of the Blood-Robe Pavilion were naturally happy. Although their leader didn't seem to be in a good state, at least their leader had opened his eyes and was exuding a terrifying aura. As long as he was still alive, there was still a chance. At this moment, the pressure in the hearts of the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces became even greater. After all, it was obvious that the Ninja Allied Forces were at a disadvantage in the battle between the Bloodcloth Pavilion and the Ninja Allied Forces. Once a powerhouse like Nangongja joined the battle, not to mention Nangongja's full strength, even if he only recovered half of his strength, it would be enough to kill the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces. With the morale rising, the Ninja Allied Forces were naturally suppressed even more fiercely. Even though Naruto had tried his best to protect the Ninja Allied Forces in the battle with Sasuke, a large number of ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces were directly killed by the disciples of the Blood-Robe Pavilion. Because of the death of a large number of ninjas, the blood was directly thrown on the ground, and the smell of blood in the air became stronger. A large amount of the smell of blood was like gasoline, directly pouring into Nangongja's already unconscious mind. The scarlet light emitted from his eyes became even more dazzling. Nangongja's body also began to struggle madly under the situation where his acupoints were pierced by the inner strength. However, the more Elder Aoki restrained Nangongja with internal force, the more he understood how dangerous and terrifying Nangongja's situation was at this moment. He could only clench his teeth and use all the strength in his body to temporarily suppress Nangongja's movements. After the battle with the 6 Kage-level ninjas, Elder Aoki began to inject his internal force into Nangongja's body to stabilize Nangongja's injury. At this moment, because Nangongja suddenly turned into a demon, Elder Aoki also consumed a lot of his internal force. Even though Elder Aoki had cultivated for many years and his internal force was very strong, he couldn't withstand such consumption. At this moment, Elder Aoki's face also became pale. After checking the internal force in his body, Elder Aoki estimated that he could only keep Nangongja immobile for about 5 minutes. After this time, Nangongja would regain his freedom, and then no one would be able to restrict Nangongja's movements. Suddenly, a powerful force erupted from Nangongja's body and began to directly attack Elder Aoki's internal force. This restriction once again shortened the time that Elder Aoki could restrain Nangongja. At the same time, it also allowed Nangongja to gain control of part of his body, such as his mouth. Murderous intent, sword energy, internal force, evil spirit, and various other abilities directly gathered in Nangongja's mouth. A simple character directly burst out from Nangongja's mouth, and a chill rose in the hearts of everyone on the battlefield. Kill. Chapter 768. When Nangongja uttered the word kill, the long-awaited Yama's shadow appeared behind Nangongja. The ferocious Yama stood quietly behind Nangongja. However, everyone who heard Nangong's kill vaguely saw a king of hell standing in front of them and staring at them. It was as if he was judging what kind of sin they had committed and what kind of method they should use to make them pay for their sins. However, the Yama's shadow only flashed by. It was completely triggered by the killing intent in Nangong's heart. Everyone only saw it for a brief moment. Without the support of Nangong's power, it also disappeared. However, Elder Qingmu, who was the closest to Nangongzhe, was obviously more affected than the others. After all, Elder Qingmu was currently restraining Nangongzhe's movements against Nangongzhe's will. If it wasn't for the fact that Elder Qingmu didn't have any malicious intent towards Nangongzhe, it was very likely that Elder Qingmu would have been killed by the killing intent of the Yama's shadow when it appeared. Even so, Elder Qingmu's head became extremely dizzy at this moment. All the guilt that Elder Qingmu thought he had long forgotten surfaced in his mind. At this moment, Elder Qingmu was unable to concentrate on using his internal force to restrict Nangongzhe's movements. Just as Old Man Qingmu could no longer maintain his consciousness, a rather rough voice reverberated in Old Man Qingmu's mind. Suppress. It was just a simple word, but at this moment, it seemed to have received a response from heaven and earth. It directly suppressed all the chaos in Elder Qingmu's mind. Elder Qingmu opened his eyes and suddenly saw a stalwart man in a black cloak standing beside Nangongzhe. The man's hair and beard were fluttering, and he had a pair of round eyes. However, for some reason, this man's figure seemed somewhat illusory. I think you have probably guessed who I am. I am Black Lion Li Yang, the familiar beast of the blood-robed pavilion's current leader. That's right, the man who suddenly appeared beside Nangongzhe and used a mantra to suppress the chaos in Elder Qingmu's mind was Black Lion Li Yang. In the previous battle, Nangongzhe had summoned Black Lion Li Yang to fight. However, there were many old, young, and women of the blood-robed pavilion left behind by Nangongzhe in the Lion Clan different space. In order to maintain the stability of the Lion Clan different space, Black Lion Li Yang had directly returned to the different space to suppress it. Even now, Li Yang felt that Nangongzhe was not in a normal state through the lion head seal that he had established with Nangongzhe. He tried his best to force his will to descend upon Nangongzhe's side. Of course, Elder Qingmu of the blood-robed pavilion greets the sacred beast. When Black Lion Li Yang heard Elder Qingmu calling him a sacred beast, he was shocked. However, the shock only lasted for a moment before it was suppressed. Although his relationship with the blood-robed pavilion was not well known, there must be some records in the ancient books of the blood-robed pavilion. He had never deliberately hidden his identity, so it was not impossible for an old man like Elder Qingmu to know his past identity. It's all in the past, so let's not talk about it. Right now, I'm just Nangong's familiar beast. I'm just fighting alongside him. The reason why I'm here isn't because of anything else. I'm here to solve the complicated situation Nangongzhe is in. Do whatever I say. Otherwise, Nangongzhe might really turn into a demon and never be able to recover. Elder Qingmu nodded in response. Perhaps the young juniors weren't aware of the identity of Li Yang, who called himself a familiar beast. However, Elder Qingmu, who had read all the ancient books in the blood-robed pavilion, knew that Li Yang was the one who fought alongside the blood-robed pavilion's ancestor. Li Yang naturally wouldn't harm the blood-robed pavilion, the faction created by the banishment pavilion, nor would he harm Nangongzhe, the successor of the banishment pavilion. Please enlighten me, Your Excellency Li Yang. I will do my best to fulfill your request. Li Yang nodded slowly. After all, Qingmu had been very steady and calm ever since Li Yang appeared. Even though Nangongzhe was in a critical situation, Qingmu didn't lose his composure. Therefore, Li Yang wasn't worried about Qingmu's ability to execute Li Yang's orders perfectly. Instead, Li Yang glanced at the calamity sword beside Nangongzhe and sent a portion of his mental strength into the sword to communicate with the sword spirit. Continue to condense your internal strength into needles and pierce the acupoints with your internal strength. Do you understand? Li Yang didn't care whether Qing Mu responded to her question or not. Instead, she continued to spew out the names of the acupuncture points and the depth of the stab like a cannonball at Qing Mu. Foot Taiyang Bladder Meridian Spleen Acupoint. 1 Cun 3 Fun. Stomach Meridian Foot 3 Li Acupoint. 2 Cun 1 Fun. Ren Meridian Shanzhong Acupoint. 1 Fun 2 Cun. 9 acupoints were listed in a row, and the depth of the needles was precisely specified. This greatly increased the difficulty of Elder Qing Mu's acupuncture. His pale face became even paler. Even his hair seemed to have dried up due to the great exhaustion of his spirit and body. You don't have to do the last acupoint. But you must ensure that the first 9 needles don't dissipate. Li Yang didn't know if it was because she saw that Qing Mu had consumed too much energy and was afraid that Qing Mu's treatment would fail because of her weakness, or because she didn't intend to let Qing Mu proceed with the last step. She directly asked Qing Mu to stop the acupuncture and stand aside to rest. Aoki had a lot of trust in Li Yang. Since Li Yang asked him to stand aside, he immediately sat down and began to recover the large amount of internal energy in his body. Chapter 769. Old man Qing Mu, who had used up a lot of energy, didn't have the strength to continue using his internal energy and stabilize the golden needles. So, he could only leave the last part to Li Yang. Li Yang closed his eyes and urged his mental power to infiltrate the tribulation sword. He used all kinds of methods to communicate with the sword spirit contained in the tribulation sword. The sword of calamity did have its own spirituality, the so-called sword spirit. However, even after so many years of nurturing, the sword spirit still only had a very simple intelligence. If it wasn't for the close relationship between Li Yang and the banishment, the sword spirit wouldn't have instinctively rejected Li Yang. Li Yang's mental power might have been torn to shreds by the tribulation lightning contained in the sword of calamity. Facing an existence like this that didn't have complete intelligence, Li Yang naturally couldn't expect it to easily understand him. So, he could only use different methods to make the sword of calamity understand him. Under Li Yang's constant persuasion, the sword of calamity's spirituality was stimulated. The body of the sword of calamity trembled like a child who was paralyzed on the ground and wanted to use its small arms and legs to stand up. It seemed a little clumsy, but it was exceptionally patient. That's right, sword of calamity. Just like that, he slowly controlled his body to stand upright. Then, he floated in the air and listened to my commands. Only by following my instructions will your master be able to regain his consciousness, and not become a puppet controlled by his own evil thoughts. Li Yang continuously used his mental power to encourage the sword spirit in the sword of calamity, and repeatedly emphasized that the sword of calamity should listen to his orders. As a sword spirit, although its intelligence wasn't complete, it was because its intelligence was relatively weak that it was more sensitive to other people's mental fluctuations. At this moment, the person who was constantly encouraging him didn't have any evil intentions in his heart. Instead, he had a hint of intimacy with him. That was why the sword spirit listened to Li Yang and constantly controlled his body to complete Li Yang's requests. As the heavenly tribulation sword spirit continued to work hard, the heavenly tribulation sword's body actually became vertical as Li Yang had requested. The hilt was facing up while the tip was facing down. It was constantly rotating on its own. A sharp aura was emitted from the heavenly tribulation sword. Now, float 1 foot above the ground and aim 1.5 inches below your master's navel. Li Yang's order came again. The sword of calamity didn't know where the tip of its sword was aiming at. 1.5 inches below the navel wasn't an unimportant acupuncture point. Instead, it was an acupuncture point that was close to the foundation of internal strength cultivators, the sea of breath point. A large amount of internal strength was accumulated in such an acupuncture point. Internal strength cultivators relied on expanding the capacity of the sea of breath point and widening the width of their meridians to increase their strength. Now, Li Yang had the sword Spirit of Calamity directly aim at the Qihai acupoint, which was the foundation of internal energy cultivators. Qing Mu, who was meditating beside Nangongzhe, immediately stopped meditating. He immediately jumped up from his meditating position and reached out his hand to grab the sword Spirit of Calamity. He wanted to stop the sword Spirit of Calamity from piercing such an important acupoint. He wanted to ask Li Yang what he was thinking to do such a thing. At this moment, Li Yang's eyes were fixed on Nangongzhe's Sea of Breath point. No one knew what he was thinking or calculating. He ignored Qing Mu's attempt to grab the Sword of Calamity with his own hand. The Sword of Calamity had its own consciousness, the Sword of Calamity's spirit. Anyone who wanted to touch the Sword of Calamity would be attacked by the Sword of Calamity's Thunder of Calamity under the control of the Sword of Calamity's spirit. Qing Mu naturally reached out to grab the hilt of the Sword of Calamity, so he bore the brunt of the powerful thunder rushing into his body. Lightning itself had a powerful paralyzing and invasive property. At this moment, old man Qing Mu had already entered a state of extreme exhaustion due to his various actions. Under the effects of the lightning's paralysis and his own exhaustion, old man Qing Mu fell into a coma. Only his hand, which was holding onto the hilt of the heavenly tribulation sword, seemed to be tightly holding onto the sword due to the stimulation of the lightning. Now, Li Yang's eyes, which had been empty and lifeless, suddenly shone brightly. Because the heavenly tribulation sword had suddenly released the heavenly punishment lightning because of old man Qing Mu's actions, Nangongzhe's internal energy, which had a certain degree of affinity with the heavenly punishment lightning, was affected by it and began to boil. Li Yang also stared at this moment. He directly sent his mental power into the Heaven's Calamity Sword and poured all the energy he used to maintain the Phantom into the Heaven's Calamity Sword. He issued a final command to the Heaven's Calamity Sword Spirit, "Stab here a little." The Sword of Calamity's spirit immediately executed the order and stabbed Nangongzhe's Sea of Breath point after receiving Li Yang's order. Li Yang disappeared due to the exhaustion of energy. Qing Mu couldn't speak because he had fallen into a coma. The Sword of Calamity didn't have complete intelligence, so it naturally had a way to speak. However, at this moment, a sharp female voice suddenly rang out on the battlefield. "Qing Mu, you old bastard! How dare you?" At this moment, Qing Mu's posture was too misleading. His hand was tightly holding the Sword of Calamity, and his face was lowered so that no one could see his expression. The sword was already stabbed into Nangongzhe's abdomen, and the wound was still bleeding. No matter how one looked at it, it was Qing Mu who directly stabbed the Sword of Calamity into Nangongzhe's abdomen. He wanted to take Nangongzhe's life. Bai Shui, who had been fighting the allied forces with Qi Yan and Ho Tu on the main battlefield, occasionally looked back at Qing Mu's situation. He just happened to see Qing Mu directly stabbing the Sword of Calamity into Nangongzhe's abdomen. Bai Shui, who had always been very calm, no longer had his usual calmness after seeing this scene. Instead, he roared in the direction of old man Qing Mu as if he had exploded. Chapter 770. Bai Shui's roar attracted the attention of all the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion and the ninjas of the Ninja Alliance to Old Man Aoki. Almost everyone saw the scene of Old Man Aoki directly stabbing the Tribulation Sword into Nangongzhe's body. Everyone was shocked speechless by this scene. After all, Old Man Aoki could be said to be a model of virtue and prestige in the Blood Cloth Pavilion. At this moment, he actually stabbed his own head with a long sword? However, just when everyone was surprised, Nangongzhe, who was lying on the ground and seemingly unable to move, suddenly stretched out a hand and grabbed the Tribulation Sword. The sharp Tribulation Sword was tightly held by Nangongzhe, but it didn't cut Nangongzhe's hand. Instead, it seemed to be very excited and trembled slightly. Okay, calm down a little. I'm still injured here. If you move around, it won't be so easy to recover." Nangongzhe's slightly weak but exceptionally gentle voice directly transmitted to everyone's ears. Bai Shui, who was slowly filled with anger, heard Nangong's voice at this moment, and her anger turned into drops of tears that directly overflowed from her eyes. After hearing Nangong's words, the tribulation sword seemed to be afraid that its movement would worsen Nangong's injury, so it also quieted down. Nangongzhi gently placed his hand on old man Qing Mu's hand, which was gripping the hilt of the calamity sword because of his tight muscles. A thick stream of internal force was transmitted into old man Qing Mu's body just like that, making old man Qing Mu's nerves, which had been tense due to the passage of lightning, relax. Old man Aoki's muscles suddenly relaxed, and his entire body collapsed to the ground because of the lack of support. At this moment, everyone saw old man Aoki's pale and aged face because of excessive consumption. The moment Bai Shui saw old man Aoki's complexion, her heart was filled with guilt. After all, old man Aoki's current condition was extremely bad. It was obvious that he had used up a lot of his source energy to deal with Nangong's problem. If he couldn't replenish his source energy in the future, it was very likely that old man Aoki's lifespan would be greatly shortened. Nangongzhi reached out and grabbed the tribulation sword's hilt, directly pulling it out of his body. He stroked the wound left by the tribulation sword with his other hand, and a thick internal force directly adhered to the wound, stopping the bleeding and constantly helping the wound heal. Nangongzhi's mind and body were indeed controlled by the murderous aura and all kinds of dangerous energy in his body because he was possessed by the devil. However, old man Aoki's 9 precise acupuncture points directly channeled the chaotic energy in Nangongzhi's body, preventing Nangongzhi's state of being possessed by the devil from spreading. However, the most important thing was the last stab of the tribulation sword. This stab directly touched Nangongzhi's dantian, which contained a large amount of internal force. However, it didn't pierce through it, and just touched the edge of the dantian. The moment it touched the dantian, the energy that Li Yang injected into the tribulation sword at the last moment was directly transmitted to Nangongzhi's dantian. The moment the energy that contained Li Yang's will entered Nangongzhi's dantian, it began to display its own power. Lions were ferocious, unstoppable, and intimidating. They were the king of all beasts. Li Yang, as the black lion among lions, was able to display the unique characteristics of a lion to the extreme, such as bravery and deterrence. Li Yang's power had the special ability to suppress evil spirits. Being possessed by the devil was a phenomenon that occurred when the power in one's body lost control and stimulated the ferocious nature in one's body. When Li Yang's power entered Nangongzhi's body, it immediately formed a powerful force with internal force and began to fight the evil spirit in Nangongzhi's body. Although both sides consumed some energy in the process, the evil spirit in Nangongzhi's body was successfully suppressed. This could be seen from Nangongzhi's eyes that had returned to normal. After the evil spirit in his body was suppressed, Nangongzhi's will also directly awakened. Nangongzhi glanced at old man Qing Mu who had fallen to the ground. He didn't put on any airs and directly went to old man Qing Mu's side to help him up. Then, he beckoned a disciple of the Blood Cloak Pavilion and handed old man Qing Mu to him. Then, he walked directly to the center of the battlefield. There was a great terror between life and death. The evil spirit controlling one's body was a phenomenon that drifted between life and death. It was precisely because of this great terror that Nangongzhi's mental state had a breakthrough. At Nangongzhi's level, the accumulation of internal force was not so important. Every breakthrough in mental state could bring about the greatest benefits to a person. Nangongzhi slowly walked to the center of the battlefield step by step. The momentum on his body also became stronger and stronger. Nangongzhi's sword domain was opened little by little. The sword domain's auxiliary ability was greater than its offensive ability. At this moment, it had become extraordinarily powerful. Everyone who was wrapped in Nangongzhi's sword domain felt an unstoppable powerful edge waiting for an opportunity to strike. Looking at the huge purple Susanoo floating in the sky, the 3 altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, and the many disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion who were constantly fighting with the allied forces, Nangongzhi directly said to everyone, "Everyone, stop attacking now. Although it was not so clear why Nangongzhi issued such an order, many ninjas of the Blood Cloak Pavilion had a kind of instinctive obedience to Nangongzhi. The moment they heard Nangongzhi's order, they immediately stopped attacking. Even if the opposite ninja may be stabbing towards them at this moment, the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion still directly withdrew the weapons in their hands. Of course, Nangongzhi couldn't let the people on his side stop attacking without any precaution. Almost at the moment when Nangongzhi issued the order to stop attacking, the powerful sword domain around Nangongzhi's body was directly released, enveloping everyone on the battlefield. The ninjas of the allied forces were directly surrounded by the sword chi derived from the sword domain. Once they made the slightest move to attack, they would be directly strangled by the sword chi. Chapter 771. For ordinary ninjas, Nangongzhi's Kenjutsu sword energy, even if it's only one, is fatal. When a large number of Kenjutsu's Kenjutsu sword domain is wrapped around them, they naturally don't dare to act rashly because of fear of Kenjutsu sword energy. For the 6 Kage-level powerhouses led by the Woodleaf Sannin and the 3 Kage-level powerhouses, although they weren't so afraid of Nangongzhi's sword chi, these powerful people had been in high positions for many years and also had a very far-reaching political vision. After the awakening of a super powerhouse like Nangongzhi, the Blood Cloth Pavilion had already taken the initiative of the entire battle. It was obviously an easy victory, but Nangongzhi directly gave up and ordered the entire Blood Cloth Pavilion to stop the attack. Such behavior was beyond everyone's imagination. Since Nangongzhi had issued such an order, then naturally, he had to give all the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion who were loyal to him an explanation. Otherwise, even if Nangongzhi had a high prestige in the Blood Cloth Pavilion, it was still possible for him to face the situation of being betrayed. Just when everyone was waiting for Nangongzhi to give them an explanation, Nangongzhi didn't disappoint everyone's expectations. He directly walked to the center of the battlefield with the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand. The disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion naturally stared closely at Nangongzhi, the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, while many ninjas of the ninja allied forces couldn't move at will because of the sword chi binding them. Disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion and ninjas of the ninja allied forces, I believe that I don't need to introduce myself too much. I am Nangongzhi, the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. I believe that now you are quite puzzled by my direct request for the entire Blood Cloth Pavilion to stop the battle and use sword chi to bind the ninjas, but you don't have to worry, I will naturally slowly tell you my own thoughts. Nangongzhi held the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand. His body did not emit the slightest bit of malice. He only used a pair of indifferent eyes to look at the ninja allied army and the Blood Cloth Pavilion who were participating in the battle. His eyes were slowly filled with an inexplicable compassion. At this moment, Nangongzhi did not hide the emotions in his eyes. Instead, everyone could see that his eyes were gradually becoming more compassionate. Originally, the reason why I took the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion to fight against the Ninja Coalition army was very simple. Our Blood Garment Pavilion's development has reached a bottleneck. This kind of peace does not only come from the Blood Garment Pavilion's internal problems, but also from the external environment. Although the ninja world isn't small, it's not that big either. While accommodating 5 behemoths, the 5 major ninja villages, it's impossible to accommodate another behemoth of the same size. Nangongzhi's eyes swept over the 3 Kages, Gara, Mei, and A, who were standing in the ninja allied army. After being met by Nangongzhi's eyes, the 3 Kages also couldn't help but show some approval. As the Kages of the ninja villages, no one knows better than them that such a big cake like the ninja world is not so big. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a ninja world war for various reasons. I don't just represent myself. From the moment I wore the blood-red robes and held the heavenly calamity sword in my hand as the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, I didn't just represent myself. I also represented countless disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Not only for myself, but also for the thousands of disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. I have no choice but to fight and fight for more benefits for them. Even if it goes against my own will, I will not hesitate. Perhaps the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces didn't know how much Nangongja had done for the Blood Cloth Pavilion, but the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion were very clear about how much Nangongja had done for the Blood Cloth Pavilion. If it wasn't for Nangongja's contributions to the Blood Cloth Pavilion over the years, even if the Blood Cloth Pavilion was an organization with great potential, it would be impossible for it to develop so quickly. So after hearing Nangongja's words, many disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion couldn't help but be moved. Maybe you don't know why I fainted just now. It's not because of any physical damage, but because I heard some words of the fourth Hokage wave Watergate. It touched my own will. I began to think deeply about whether I should stick to my own will or give up part of my will for the sake of the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. To be honest, even now, I haven't found a perfect answer to this question, because whether it's public interest or selfishness, it's a part of my mood. If I can't face and accept such a mood, then I'm really irresponsible to myself. Ninjas pursue the ninja path that they set for themselves. Such a so-called ninja path is a path that guides them forward and makes them stronger. Once they violate their own ninja path, then there will be no room for further progress, and they will directly block their own path of becoming stronger. For internal force cultivators, what they seek is their own heart. Internal force cultivators' practice is a kind of practice that constantly develops their body and spirit with the help of the forces of nature. Therefore, in such a process, when facing a substantial imbalance in the development of their physical and spiritual abilities, the so-called heart devil will appear, that is, the power that is difficult to control will disturb their mind. Therefore, in the process of internal force cultivators' practice, what they need to adhere to is their own heart. Once they violate their own heart, they will directly be disturbed by the heart devil, and their strength will be damaged, and in the worst case, they will die. Nangongja didn't hide anything. Instead, he directly told what happened to him. Hearing that Nangongja fell into such a dangerous situation because of his own heart and the needs of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion couldn't help but feel ashamed in their hearts. After all, it was their incompetence that caused Nangongja to fall into such a dangerous situation. After hearing Nangongja's words, the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces also resonated with Nangongja's love for the Blood Cloth Pavilion and his restraint of his emotions. After all, as a ninja, almost every ninja has more or less experienced such a situation where their own heart and the interests of the ninja village conflict. Since they have similar experiences, they naturally have similar resonance. Chapter 772. When he noticed that many disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion and the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces had resonated with his words at this moment, Nangongja also loosened his shackles on the Ninja Allied Forces a little, but he still maintained his sword domain. After all, one can't guard against the intention of harming others, and it's only right to take certain measures. After being a ninja for a long time, Nangongja knew better than anyone how cheap the so-called feelings of a ninja are and how they can be directly discarded at any time. But when I have been entangled in how to deal with my selfishness and fairness, I suddenly found that when I triggered such a war involving many disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion and the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces, the so-called selfishness and fairness have already been intertwined. How can I talk about whether it's purely for the Blood Cloth Pavilion or for myself? After saying that, Nangongja couldn't help but look down at the sword in his hand. There seemed to be scarlet blood left in the cracks of the sword because of all the years of killing. His eyes were full of helplessness and contempt for himself. In fact, Nangongja had always thought that he was the one who had paid the most, but when he looked back at everything he had experienced, how could other people's lives be more comfortable than his? No matter who it was impossible for anyone to have a perfect life because as long as one was still in life, it was inevitable to face the tests that life brought to oneself. Perhaps such tests were different for everyone, but each of these tests undoubtedly brought about endless troubles for people. He didn't know when Nangongzhi had become the kind of self-pitying and pretentious human that he hated the most. It was precisely because he was disturbed by his inner demon that Nangongzhi obtained such an opportunity. Between life and death, between gains and losses, between survival and death, he was no longer in the situation, but had jumped out of the situation and started to observe everything about himself. After understanding my own mistakes, my own vision has also changed. Now, what I care about is no longer temporary gains and losses, but long-term gains and losses. Looking at the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion and the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces lying on the ground, they have lost their own body temperature. They didn't have to suffer such pain, and their people didn't have to accept the sadness of their deaths. But it is precisely because of the influence of personal selfishness and public interest that such a war was born. It is my fault. Nangongzhi's eyes swept over the corpses on the ground, and the sadness in his eyes was so strong that it was almost overflowing. He directly carried the Heaven's Disaster sword in his hand on his back. Obviously, he was ready to stop attacking. Nangongzhi loudly made his declaration to the ninjas of the Allied forces and the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. From now on, the Bloodcloth Pavilion, for the sake of eternal peace and no longer spread sorrow to the ninja world, I will apply to the Allied Ninja Allied forces to stop the war and negotiate peace. I ask the person in charge of the Allied Ninja Allied forces to give me an answer after the negotiation. Although when Nangongzhi began to restrict the attacks of the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, everyone knew that it was very likely that the Bloodcloth Pavilion would not continue to fight with the Allied Ninja Allied forces, but when Nangongzhi really announced such a decision, the ninjas of the Allied Ninja Allied forces couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. After all, the strength of the current battlefield was too obvious. If the battle between the two sides really continued, then there was a 30% chance that the Allied Ninja Allied forces and the Bloodcloth Pavilion would both suffer, and a 70% chance that the Allied Ninja Allied forces would be directly destroyed while the Bloodcloth Pavilion would suffer relatively serious damage. Now, although the Allied Ninja Allied forces didn't care much about Nangongzhi's inconsistency and reluctantly attributed the reason to his own understanding of the stream of consciousness. After all, now it was enough to stop the war and give the Allied Ninja Allied forces a chance to continue to survive. Whether Nangongzhi's reason was sufficient or not was not worth the Allied Ninja Allied forces to consider. It was better to let the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, as well as the five-element altar master, and Nangongzhi have an in-depth discussion. Disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, now listen to my order to gather and retreat 5 miles to show the Allied Ninja Allied forces our determination to negotiate. After making his declaration of truce, Nangongzhi didn't wait for the Allied Ninja Allied forces to respond to his declaration. He directly ordered the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion to leave the battlefield and set up camp. Although Nangongzhi's words just now combined with the impression many disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion had of Nangongzhi, and reluctantly made the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion accept Nangongzhi's words, but as the higher-ups of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, the 4 altar masters here wouldn't accept Nangongzhi's words so easily. After all, the losses of the Bloodcloth Pavilion here were too great. If they directly retreat now, the losses of this battle would be too great. Moreover, this time, the Blood Cloak Pavilion and the 5 great shinobi villages have completely shed all pretense of cordiality. Although the 5 great shinobi villages don't have enough power to deal with the Blood Cloak Pavilion due to many limitations in strength, but as long as the Blood Cloak Pavilion still exists in the shinobi world, it will definitely become a stubborn bone in the throat of the 5 great shinobi villages. As long as they accumulate enough power in their hands, the shinobi allied forces will definitely directly destroy the Blood Cloak Pavilion with a thunderous force. It can be said that even if they used up the last strength in their hands now, it would be much better than negotiating with the Allied Ninja Allied forces. Currently, the Bloodcloth Pavilion had a clear advantage. Once the ninjas of the Allied Ninja Allied forces were given too much time to recover their strength, then this battle would become even more difficult to fight. However, other than the unconscious old man Qingmu, Bai Shui, Qi Yan, Ho Tu, and the other 5 element altar masters did not act up on the spot. Instead, they followed Nangong's instructions and led the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion to retreat and set up camp. In the final analysis, the reason why the 4 altar masters were so obedient was that after Nangongja finished the declaration of peace, he suddenly cast a glance at the 3 altar masters. There was deep wisdom in his gaze, so the altar masters didn't doubt it at all. They were very convinced that Nangongja actually had his own arrangements. Chapter 773. Seeing that the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion actually retreated directly, abandoning the victory that they had won with so much blood and sacrifice, even the ninjas of the ninja allied forces couldn't believe it at this moment. They could only look at the remaining 6 Kage-level ninjas in the ninja allied forces and Uzumaki Naruto, who had just saved everyone. Although Naruto has made a lot of progress over the years, Naruto's growth was mostly focused on combat. Such a large-scale battle and the treachery between people were still a little strange to Naruto, so at this time, the ones who really had the right to speak were the Woodleaf Sannin and the 3 Kage-level ninjas. No matter what these people from the Blood Garment Pavilion are planning, their retreat is not bad for us. At the very least, we have obtained a chance to regroup. Now that we have obtained such an opportunity, we must not be overly cautious and waste it. Instead of thinking about it and trying to figure out what the people from the Blood Cloth Pavilion are thinking, it is better to focus on recovering our strength and do our best to gather our strength in preparation to continue confronting the people from the Blood Cloth Pavilion. As long as we have enough strength in our hands, regardless of whether it is a life and death battle or a genuine peace negotiation, we will naturally have more leverage in our hands. Looking at the hesitant eyes of the people, as the only woman of the 3 Kage-level ninjas, Mei, the 4th-generation Mizukage, spoke her thoughts to the others present. As a woman, Mei's mind was more delicate than a man's, but as a ninja village ninja, she was very decisive. The 2 different characteristics of delicacy and decisiveness were perfectly integrated in Mei's body at this moment, and her suggestion to everyone was naturally supported by most of them. After all, no one thought that they were smart enough to directly guess what a very smart person like Nangongja was planning. Since there was no way to predict Nangongja's actions with 100% probability, then it was better not to predict. Now, they focused on recovering their strength and began to draw a part of their strength from their respective ninja villages to concentrate their strength against the many powerful internal energy cultivators of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. After confirming that all the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion had evacuated to a safe position, Nangongja also left the field of vision of the ninja allied forces to catch up with the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Just now, Nangongja issued the order for the whole army to retreat 5 miles, but in fact, many ninjas of the Blood Cloth Pavilion stopped under Nangongja's order and were waiting for orders. At this moment, Old Man Aoki has recovered his consciousness, and Nangongja personally helped him to the main tent. In the main tent, Bishui, Akame, and Hutu have been waiting for a long time. When they saw Nangongja directly help Old Man Aoki to the main tent, they naturally knew what to do and directly found a chair for Old Man Aoki to sit on. After settling Old Man Aoki, Nangongja also directly sat on his own chair in the main tent. Looking at Bishui, Akame, Hutu, and Old Man Aoki, who were in front of him with a little bit of curiosity, Nangongja didn't put on any airs and directly told the 4 of them about the plan he had made before. Nangongja's series of plans of fighting against the allied forces of ninja, consuming their combat power, forming an alliance of small countries, occupying the land of wind, forming a country of wind and forming a situation of dividing the world into 2 was directly told to the 4 altar lords without any reservation. After hearing Nangongja's series of plans, the 4 altar lords also began to predict in their hearts how high the success rate of such a plan would be. As a result, everyone discovered that such a method was the plan with the highest success rate. It was far better than directly defeating the allied forces of ninja directly has a better prospect. After all, the 5 great ninja villages have ruled the entire ninja world for many years, and such a kind of inertia has formed in the ninja world. Once the Blood Cloth Pavilion breaks such order, it will naturally lead the ambitious people in the entire ninja world to the brink of destruction. Once the ambition breaks out, it will be like a river bursting through a dam, waiting for all the ambitious people to either die or achieve success to usher in stability again. However, such a process is destined to be very long. If you don't believe it, you can look at the history of the entire ninja world. The general trend of the world has always been like this. After a long time, there will be division, after a long time, there will be unity, after a long time, there will be chaos, and after a long time, there will be peace. However, what the Blood Cloth Pavilion needs is not a chaotic world, but a relatively stable world for them to slowly develop their strength. If they want to develop themselves, simply building a car behind closed doors is not a good choice. On the contrary, the existence of a ninja with a certain degree of threat can really stimulate the sense of crisis in everyone's heart, so that no one can slack off in the slightest. After all, any slack will directly lead to the death of everyone. However, such a plan still has its own problems. First of all, such a plan must be limited to a very small area, or even only one person knows about it. Second, such a plan can only be carried out by Nangongzhe alone. After all, in the entire Blood Cloth Pavilion, only Nangongzhe has the prestige to make everyone willingly obey him. Just like in the battlefield just now, because Nangongzhe accidentally fell into a coma, such a plan was directly scrapped by half. Now, it has increased a lot of difficulty to make up for it. Supreme Sama, we are already clear about your plan. Although it is quite late now, I believe that since you will tell us your plan now, you must think that you have a certain plan in your heart. And directly giving up the victory of the battlefield, you must have your own plan, so no matter what kind of plan you have, we will directly obey your orders. We have 100% trust in you. Looking at Nangongzhe, Aoki, who was already very weak, directly said such a long sentence. At this moment, the other 5 elements altar lords of the Blood Cloth Pavilion looked at Nangongzhe with full of trust in their eyes. Such a feeling of being trusted made Nangongzhe's heart extremely warm at this moment. Chapter 774. Looking at the 4-5 elements altar lords standing in front of him, Nangongzhe was also very emotional. After all, in the ninja world, how many people can trust him so unconditionally like these 5 elements altar lords? Nangongzhe clapped his hands, and Uchiha Sasuke also directly walked out from behind a curtain in the big tent. Seeing Uchiha Sasuke walking out like this, although the eyes of the 4-5 elements altar lords were quite surprised, there was not much rejection. After all, although Uchiha Sasuke once had the identity of a ninja, Uchiha Sasuke was also the disciple of Blood Cloth Pavilion's chief, Nangongzhe. In the battle just now, Uchiha Sasuke personally killed many ninjas of the ninja allied forces and completely broke with the 5 major ninja villages, so at this moment, it was not difficult to understand that Uchiha Sasuke directly walked out. Although there was no way for my plan to be smoothly implemented before due to various reasons, I have been preparing for such a plan for a long time. The small countries themselves have also gathered enough strength. We must not give up such a force easily. Looking at the 4-5 elements altar lords and Uchiha Sasuke standing in front of him, Nangongzhe's eyes flashed with a trace of light, and then he said to them, "The plan I made before actually still has room for implementation. Now we suddenly want to negotiate with the ninja allied forces to get enough conditions for the implementation of our plan. I think now we can divide the personnel inside Blood Cloth Pavilion into 3 parts, 2 big and 1 small. A small part of them will still stay here and follow me to attract the attention of the ninja allied forces, so that they have no way to pay attention to other places. Akane and Bishui will lead a group of people and a group of people from the Small Country Alliance to attack the Land of Wind, while Hudu, Sasuke, and Aoki will lead another group of people and a group of people from the Small Country Alliance to attack the Land of Earth, striving to take down these 2 countries in the shortest time. I believe that with the consistent performance of the ninja allied forces in large-scale wars, they will definitely take advantage of our sudden ceasefire to transfer more forces from their own countries to reinforce their own army. The strength of the wind country itself is relatively weak among the 5 major countries, and the earth country, because of the serious injury of the Sandaime Tsuchikage, has no leader. They can only listen to the arrangements of the other ninja villages, and like a fool, they draw a large number of forces from their territory. Once we conquer these 2 countries, we can organize our men to guard the borders and swallow these 2 huge pieces of land into our stomachs. Although the wind country is relatively barren, the earth country can be considered a fertile place by then. These 2 huge pieces of land are enough to support our development. I have already roughly planned out the attack route for your 2 groups. Now, I will explain it to you. If you have any opinions, you can speak up and we can discuss it together. With that said, Nangongja directly spread out a detailed map of the shinobi world in the main tent and explained some of his plans to the 4-5 elements altar lords and Uchiha Sasuke. In the main tent of the ninja allied forces, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Uzumaki Naruto representing Wood Leaf, Terumi Mei representing Mist, A representing Cloud, Gaara representing Sunigakure, and Inoki's son Katsuchi and granddaughter Kuratsuchi representing Rock Village. A total of 8 people sat directly at a round table and discussed what kind of countermeasures the ninja allied forces should take to deal with the Bloodcloak Pavilion. Since the Bloodcloak Pavilion has proposed such a request, and the Bloodcloak Pavilion leader Nangongja's speech on the battlefield seems to be really emotional, is it really possible for us to negotiate? Facing the long silence of everyone, the relatively younger Kuratsuchi from Iwagakure was the first to speak. Hearing Kuratsuchi's childish speech, except for Naruto who seemed to have some consideration, everyone didn't take it seriously. However, Kuratsuchi's status was very special. She was the granddaughter of Inoki, the Tsuchikage. After all, the current ninja allied forces was composed of the 5 major ninja villages, and there was no specific leader. Therefore, for Kuratsuchi, who represented Rock Village at this moment, no one knew how much they despised her childish thoughts. After all, this Nangongja of the Bloodcloak Pavilion is a ninja from Woodleaf Village. I don't know what Woodleaf Village knows about such an existence. Cloud Village's Raikage directly asked the 3 people from Woodleaf Village. After all, Nangongja's title of Ninja Yama was made during the Battle of Woodleaf Village. Since he was a ninja from Woodleaf Village, I definitely didn't believe that Woodleaf Village didn't know enough about such a person. And maybe because he was a little impatient at the moment, although Raikage's words sounded polite, his tone was inevitably a bit aggressive. Listening to A's question, even Jiraiya, who was famous for his good temper, felt a bit uncomfortable at the moment, let alone Uzumaki Naruto, who was very impatient. Raikage-sama, I don't know what you mean by this. Almost trying his best to suppress his temper, Naruto pressed his hand on the table, and his whole body slightly leaned in the direction of Raikage, obviously very excited. Orochimaru glanced at the very excited Naruto and didn't want to dissuade Naruto. He just looked at A with his slightly gloomy eyes and said to A, Yondaime Raikage, although Nangongja used to be a ninja of Woodleaf Village, this person was very mature when he was a teenager. Although he didn't do things flawlessly, he left very few flaws. It's not realistic to say that our Woodleaf Village didn't investigate any information about Nangongja over the years, but this information involves the strong person beyond the Kage level, and it needs to be checked by the Hokage himself. Naturally, we have no way to access such information. Now, the most powerful medical ninja of our Woodleaf Village is rushing to the battlefield under our deployment, and at the same time, they will treat the injured ninjas in the many ninja coalition forces. Chapter 775. Orochimaru, a former rebellious ninja of Woodleaf, became the backbone of Woodleaf's forces in the meeting of the 5 major ninja villages, which was really interesting. With the hot temper of the 4th Raikage, when he saw Orochimaru sitting at the table, he was already a little unhappy, but after listening to Orochimaru's words, unexpectedly didn't directly show his temper, but directly sat in his seat. Although his face was not good, he still didn't speak. In the end, it was because of one thing that Orochimaru just mentioned. Woodleaf was gathering its internal medical ninja to support the frontline troops. Although medical ninja itself has a long history, and it's not a type of ninja that Woodleaf monopolizes, it has to be said that during the Second Shinobi World War and the Third Shinobi World War, Woodleaf Village has formed a complete medical ninja training mechanism. The medical ninja of Woodleaf Ninja Village is unique in the shinobi world, whether it's in terms of personal quality or group number. Woodleaf can bring such a group of treasures directly to the battlefield at this moment is already a move beyond everyone's expectations. Or in other words, this is already a good behavior of Woodleaf. A himself has no special malice towards Woodleaf. The reason why he put pressure on Woodleaf Ninja Village is actually to make Woodleaf do more to support such a battle, and now it's obvious that Woodleaf has shown enough sincerity, so it naturally won't be so aggressive. The reason why A's face is not so good now is entirely because Orochimaru, a former rebellious ninja, seems to have been completely recruited by Woodleaf and began to do his best for Woodleaf. Such a genius who doesn't care about the means returned to Woodleaf, naturally, it will greatly increase the strength of Woodleaf, which is not a good thing for other ninja villages. After seeing that Woodleaf Village has shown enough sincerity, the other two Kages of Cloud and Mist villages were not to be outdone, and naturally, they were not to be outdone, and they said that they will draw a part of their strength from their own ninja village to join the frontline battlefield. The number of reinforcements mentioned by Terumi Mei and AI was very amazing. It seemed like they were staking everything on this one bet. Looking at Woodleaf, Mist, and Cloud Village, Gaara as the Kazekage, Kuratsuchi, and Kitsuchi as the representatives of Iwagakure also had a good eyesight at this moment. After all, the current behavior of Woodleaf, Mist, and Cloud Village is also a kind of behavior to show their muscles to a certain extent. If they retreat at this time, it is likely that after the war, they will be constantly exploited by everyone. Don't look at how everyone is cooperating with each other and fighting together. Once the common enemy of these comrades disappears, these comrades will directly turn from hounds to hungry wolves and pounce on their flesh and blood. The history of the past countless years is enough to prove that comrades with common interests are real comrades. Once the common interests are lost, the so-called comrades will become out-and-out thieves. After a long silence, Gaara, as the fifth Kazekage, also directly said his decision with a slightly dignified face. Sunigakure is willing to provide the entire Ninja Alliance army with 500 bottles of top-level poison, and will send 300 elite puppeteers and 200 Jonin-level ninjas to join the battlefield. The biggest advantage of Sunigakure itself compared to other ninja villages is its unique poison and unparalleled puppeteer skills. Cultivating an elite puppeteer is not much easier than cultivating a Jonin-level ninja. It can even be said that it is more difficult. Now, Gaara can directly say that he will send so many ninjas to support the frontline. Obviously, the Sunigakure is also willing to pay a lot of money. Orochimaru, AI, and Mei glanced at Gaara with extremely obscure eyes, but their eyes weren't filled with admiration for Gaara's willingness to support the Ninja Coalition army, but they were quite surprised. They were surprised that Gaara could become the Kazekage of one of the 5 great ninja villages with such a personality. What did Woodleaf Village pay? Although Orochimaru claims to be the strongest medical ninja unit, medical ninjas are very rare. Even Woodleaf Ninja Village itself doesn't have many medical ninjas, and adding the word strongest is a subtraction of the already scarce number. Such a unit is only about 100 people. Although the Mist and the Cloud expressed their attitude very early, and the numbers they said were very amazing, they were also accurately counting the number of ninjas to ensure that enough ninjas stay in their villages. They didn't go all out like Gaara. Gaara wasn't a fool. As a Jinchuriki, Gaara was very sensitive to other people's eyes, good thoughts, and evil thoughts. Orochimaru, Terumi Mei, and A's eyes were actually caught by Gaara, but Gaara had no choice but to make such a desperate move. Compared to other ninja villages, the geographical location of the Wind Country is very disadvantageous. Most of its territory is desert, and there is no way for civilians to survive. In some places, even ninjas will die if they are not careful. Although this time's Shinobi World War is not an internal war between the 5 major ninja villages, the situation is far better than the previous ones. It can be said that such a war has almost wiped out the Wind Country's strength. According to Gaara's estimate, it will take at least 10 years to recover with the ability of his country. Sand Village can't afford to stay in place for 10 years. After all, the development of the ninja world is the survival of the fittest and the survival of the strong. While other ninja villages are improving, Sand Village is still licking its wounds. Such a situation is simply a slow death. That's why Gaara was so desperate and directly pulled almost all of Sunagakure's power into the battlefield, using these forces as bargaining chips in the final negotiation to win more benefits for the land of Wind and Sunagakure. Orochimaru, and Terumi Mei were also shocked. After all, most of the Kage are stable existences. Suddenly, Gaara staged such a big gamble, which really surprised everyone. Chapter 776. Gaara's method surprised Orochimaru, Mei, and but it also added a lot of pressure to Kitsuchi and Kuratsuchi, who had been hesitating. Sandai Monoki of the Rock Village was still in a coma, so there was no one in the Rock Village who could make the decision at this moment. They could only push out Kitsuchi and Kuratsuchi, who had good prestige and strength, to represent the entire Rock Village. Everyone present was very familiar with Inoki because Inoki himself could be said to be an old man. His words and actions were almost watertight. When it came to his own interests, he was very difficult to deal with. But relatively speaking, Kitsuchi and Kuratsuchi, who were sitting here now, didn't understand the roundabout gullies in the hearts of these high-ranking people. Instead, they directly understood the meaning of everyone's words. Looking at the 4 other villages, except for the Rock Village, at this moment, the hearts of Kitsuchi and Kuratsuchi became heavier and heavier. Although they weren't so good at scheming against people, as relatives of Inoki, Kuratsuchi naturally knew the current situation of the Rock Village. If they want to keep up with the number of support, the Rock Village will definitely face great danger. Such a difficult decision wasn't something that Kuratsuchi could make. While Kuratsuchi were still struggling in their hearts, the people of the other 4 villages also looked at Kuratsuchi, as if they were waiting for how much support the Rock Village would give to the front line. At this moment, everyone's eyes seemed to be directly pressing on Kuratsuchi's hearts, making it more difficult for them to make their own decision. The 2 of you don't need to worry, after all, the 2 of you are not the official Tsuchikage of the Rock Village. The decision we make now is likely to be a decision that will affect the future of our village. Please don't be too anxious, as long as you think carefully and make a decision, we will be here patiently waiting for the 2 of you to make a decision. After seeing the hesitation of Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi, Terumi Mei, as the Mizukage, directly persuaded the father and daughter. When she spoke, she was extremely gentle, as if she wanted to use this method to calm the 2 of them down a little. That's right, anyway, we have already decided what kind of price we should pay before coming here, and the order has already been issued to our own villages. Even if the Rock Village can send people here, it's just icing on the cake. It's naturally better to have them, but it's not a big deal if they don't come. Immediately after Terumi Mei's voice fell, Orochimaru's slightly gloomy voice directly passed into everyone's ears. After hearing his words, Kuratsuchi's eyes turned red, but there was no way for them to refute. The words spoken by Terumi Mei and Orochimaru made people feel relieved and angry. The tension and relaxation were quite coordinated. At this moment, the shame and anger in the hearts of the father and daughter, Kuratsuchi and Kitsuchi, were stimulated to the extreme. After all, their experience was too shallow, and the tacit words between Orochimaru and Terumi Mei directly pushed Kuratsuchi to a situation where they had to make their own decision. The more anxious a person was to prove himself, the more fatal the decision he would make. When Kuratsuchi sat together with red eyes, even if you don't deliberately listen to what the 2 of them were talking about, it was enough to guess that their mood at the moment must be very unstable. Finally, under the heavy gaze of everyone, Kuratsuchi made their own decision with difficulty. The Rock Village is willing to send 100 elite Earth Release Ninjutsu Squad and 300 Jonin to support the battlefield. After saying such a sentence, Kuratsuchi and Kitsuchi directly left the main tent of the ninja allied forces with a bad look on their faces and went to the place where the ninjas of their villages gathered to pass on the orders they had just decided. Seeing the Rock Village's representative leaving without saying goodbye, the other shinobi villages also left one by one. Looking at the other shinobi villages leaving, Naruto said to Jiraiya, who was standing beside him, "That's right. Lascivious sage, it's obvious that everyone is working hard for victory, but in the end, why are they not on the same page? People often say that a wise man is great wisdom looks stupid. Perhaps Naruto is not a person with great wisdom, but the tense atmosphere in the main tent was still captured by Naruto. At this time, it should be the time to work together to fight against the blood-robed pavilion, but why did everyone start to plot against each other? Such a situation made Naruto feel very sad and puzzled at the same time. Naruto. In fact, even a person like me who has been in the ninja world for many years can't give you a perfect answer to the question you asked. Because the human heart is like the flow of a vast river, it changes everywhere and changes according to one's heart. Any small change may directly change a person's mind. Listening to Naruto's question, Jiraiya, who was very close to Naruto, naturally couldn't remain silent, and Jiraiya also hoped that Naruto could make progress, so he began to tell his thoughts to Naruto. Let's not talk about the future, let's talk about why the ninja allied forces are fighting against each other at this moment. In fact, in the final analysis, it's because the blood-robed pavilion has shown a bit of fatigue. Although the blood-robed pavilion itself has a very outstanding Nangongja as its leader, the blood-robed pavilion itself has really shown itself in the ninja world for too short a time. Although we were at a disadvantage in the battle with the blood-robed pavilion, that's because the people of the 5 major ninja villages in the front line were already mentally tired and physically exhausted. When all our reinforcements arrived, how could the blood-robed pavilion, who only had a little advantage in the battle just now, resist? Since victory is not so far away, then everyone in a high position should naturally think about how to share the benefits brought by the war instead of fighting wholeheartedly. Chapter 777. Listening to the almost absurd words from Jiraiya's mouth, Naruto's heart became more and more strange. Obviously, everything is not a foregone conclusion yet. Why is everyone already thinking about how to get more benefits for themselves instead of thinking about how to hold the victory of the war in their hands? Suddenly, such a sentence suddenly appeared in Naruto's mind: meat-eaters are despicable. People in high positions often attach great importance to benefits. If they can't get enough benefits from a matter, many people in high positions can't put their mind into this matter at all. Just like now, when the people of the 5 major shinobi villages think that the threat of the blood-robed pavilion is no longer great, and they can take down the blood-robed pavilion directly after paying a certain price, everyone also began to use their own means to grab their share of the war dividend. Lascivious Sennin, they are starting to harm each other like this. Are they really not afraid of losing this war? Looking at Jiraiya, Naruto was puzzled, but he couldn't find the answer at all. Listening to Naruto's question, for a while, Jiraiya also didn't know how to answer. When Jiraiya and Naruto fell into a dilemma at the same time, Orochimaru suddenly opened his mouth and said to them, "Don't worry. Sure enough, you are people of the same origin. Even on such an issue, you are also digging into a bull's horn." Hearing Orochimaru's words, Naruto's anger was immediately aroused. For this Sandame Yuan-Fei, who regarded him as his grandfather, Orochimaru, who killed him, and Uchiha and Sasuke from Woodleaf, Naruto's impression of him can be said to be not so good. And now, Orochimaru directly ridiculed him and Jiraiya. Naruto, who was very easily provoked, naturally became very uneasy at this moment. And just when Naruto was about to attack, Jiraiya directly reached out and pulled Naruto. In the entire shinobi world, if there's someone who can understand what kind of person Orochimaru is, it's definitely Jiraiya. Previously, Orochimaru's actions were very extreme because of some defects in his soul, but now, Orochimaru's extreme thoughts have been erased from his soul after his resurrection. Now, the reason why Orochimaru directly provoked Naruto and Jiraiya was actually because of some bad taste in his heart. It was precisely because Jiraiya knew how bad and black-bellied Orochimaru's character was that he reached out to stop Naruto. He didn't want the friction between the two to become more intense. Jiraiya couldn't stop Orochimaru, but he could stop Naruto. Looking at Jiraiya, who was holding his hand tightly, Naruto forcibly suppressed all the anger in his heart, but his eyes were still staring at Orochimaru, wanting Orochimaru to give him a reasonable explanation. What you two see is the deception between the shinobi villages, and you think that such deception is not a good thing. But have you taken a good look at the result of such deception? Woodleaf sent elite medical ninjas, and several other shinobi villages also drew a large part of their power directly into the battlefield. There is no doubt that the strength of the shinobi allied forces has been greatly strengthened at this moment. Sometimes the process is not so important, because the result is what can really play a role and be passed down. So, even if everyone has their own calculations in their hearts, these things are not so important. As long as our expectations can be achieved, what's there to care about? As a result theorist, Orochimaru only needs a result in his own imagination. As for what others think in their hearts, Orochimaru doesn't care at all. Orochimaru's point of view can be said to be fundamentally different from Naruto's and Jiraiya's views. So after hearing Orochimaru's words, although they knew that what Orochimaru said was reasonable, Naruto and Jiraiya still didn't have any problems solved at this moment. Instead, they became more worried. Looking at Naruto and Jiraiya's appearance, Orochimaru also knew that his point of view didn't convince these two rather stubborn guys. However, Orochimaru had already been mentally prepared. He had been with Jiraiya for so long. Naturally, he knew that Jiraiya wouldn't accept his point of view at all. So after Orochimaru finished all his words, he directly turned and left the Shinobi Allied Forces headquarters tent. After Jiraiya and Naruto looked at each other, they shook their heads helplessly and directly left the headquarters tent. In the Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp, there were originally thousands of people in the camp. At this moment, only about 200 people were left in the camp. The remaining disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion directly left the Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp in small teams and went to the designated location to gather. Although most of the people have been taken away, the Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp still maintained the size of thousands of people to cover up the emptiness inside. Nangongja also wrapped his sword domain around the entire Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp. He always paid attention to whether there were ninjas from the ninja allied forces to investigate the Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp. Once he found the ninja allied forces ninjas, Nangongja would immediately deploy the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples to attack. When necessary, he would even personally attack those ninjas from the ninja allied forces. Now what Nangongja needs to do is to try his best to deceive the many ninjas of the ninja allied forces. The more ninjas are delayed in this place, the more room Nangongja's designated plan will have to be carried out and the more likely it will succeed. Sitting in his seat, Nangongja looked at a piece of paper in his hand. After carefully reading it several times, Nangongja directly injected a part of his sword chi into the paper in his hand, directly crushing the paper into powder. With a gentle wave of his hand, the paper dissipated into the dust. Sure enough. After seeing that I took the initiative to admit defeat, the ninja allied forces immediately couldn't help but want to take advantage of the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disadvantage and start preparing to directly defeat the Blood Cloak Pavilion? It's a pity. Nara Shikaku's status is still too low. The only ninja who is proficient in the art of war was directly ignored. The ninja allied forces can only fight me blindly. Chapter 778. Just when the reinforcements mobilized by the ninja allied forces had not yet arrived at the battlefield, suddenly, an invitation was sent from the Blood Cloak Pavilion's base to the ninja allied forces base. This letter was naturally written by Nangongzhi himself and sent someone to deliver it to the ninja allied forces. After receiving such an invitation, the ninja allied forces naturally wouldn't underestimate it. The representatives of the 5 great ninja villages once again gathered in the main tent at this moment, looking at such an invitation made of ordinary paper. Perhaps it's because they've been ninjas for too long. After seeing such an invitation from the enemy camp, they naturally wouldn't open such an invitation so casually. Almost all the people who were proficient in poison and mechanism jutsu were gathered here, and after studying this invitation for a long time, they still didn't find any problems. After waiting for a long time for the inspection, this was the only result they got. Everyone felt a little awkward in their hearts. Among them, the most hot-tempered one, walked directly to the invitation and grabbed it in his hand. "Fourth Raikage-sama, please don't worry. Let's be careful and check it carefully again before opening such an invitation, okay?" Seeing a holding such an invitation in his hand, Kitsuchi was very nervous, and he quickly came forward to persuade a not to be so reckless. However, there is a feud between the rock and the cloud. Over the years, no one knows how many people have lost their lives because of the conflict between the 2 villages. Even if Kitsuchi didn't say anything that would cause a misunderstanding, it still made A's heart very uncomfortable. Iwagakure is really a group of cowards. The first thing you think of is conspiracy. Since you're all so timid, let me see what's the mystery of such an invitation. If you guys are afraid, just find a corner and stay there. Although the Raikage's words were mainly aimed at Iwagakure, it also directly ridiculed the entire allied forces and their villages. Even if everyone knew A's temper, they couldn't help but be a bit angry. However, Ai didn't care if others were angry at him or not. If they were really angry, they could just come up and fight with him. What was the point of showing their anger with his eyes? He put his finger into the slit of the invitation card and opened it directly. The words that were written with a brush rushed directly into Ai's eyes. "War or peace, do you have a decision?" Just 8 words were enough to fill up the entire invitation card. After seeing these words, A's eyes suddenly became a bit dazed, as if a sharp sword was held in Nangongzhi's hand and stabbed towards him. In a panic, A directly threw the invitation in his hand away, and he also directly jumped back half a step, as if he was avoiding something. When the crowd saw that AI had retreated, they began to feel nervous. Everyone was also prepared for battle. Their eyes were vigilantly looking at the invitation card that AI had tossed aside. After a subconsciously dodged, he also touched his goatee a bit awkwardly. After all, he was so arrogant and ridiculed everyone, and he even opened the invitation, but now he was directly scared by the invitation. It was really difficult for A to accept. But A's hand touched his chin, but he couldn't touch his goatee. Ai Qingjie covered his chin with his entire hand. When he touched his chin, he found that the beard on his chin had been directly cut into a flat cut as if it had been cut by a sharp blade. This, A slightly exclaimed, and everyone also looked at A's direction. Suddenly, they found that A's goatee was cut into a rather funny appearance, but they didn't have the slightest mood of ridicule in their hearts. Instead, their eyes became more cautious. A mere invitation can directly make the fourth Raikage, a Kage of a village, unable to dodge, and it took him a long time to react after being hit? Is this a joke? The strength of Nangong of the Bloodcloak Pavilion has reached such a level? After seeing such a scene, the hearts of all the members of the ninja allied forces sank. Everyone knows that Nangong's sharp sword attack is a powerful existence, and the ability to cut off the fourth Raikage's goatee without him noticing was also done by the sword attack. The fact that the sword attack could produce such an effect is enough to prove how powerful Nangongzhi is at this moment. It even gave everyone the illusion that the previous battle was actually a joke between Nangongzhi and the ninja allied forces, and then Nangongzhi used the sword domain to restrict everyone in the battlefield. This kind of feeling became more and more intense. For the unknown, as long as one is a person, they will instinctively feel fear. And what level of strength Nangongzhi has at this moment, and how much of a threat he can pose to the ninja allied forces. At this moment, all of these have become unknown. How can the ninjas of the ninja allied forces not feel fear in their hearts? After a little fear appeared in everyone's heart, and then looking at the invitation that Nangongja handed to the ninja allied forces, everyone was quite at a loss at this moment. Should we fight or make peace? Fight. Can we really fight against such a strong person who doesn't know the depth of his strength? And if we make peace, then as we expected, will we be able to see the Bloodcloak Pavilion kneel down and beg for mercy, and then directly plunder the Bloodcloak Pavilion's savings? Originally, they thought that they would win, but now it seems that they are starting to think that the situation will develop in the direction of 50-50. The heads of the 5 major ninja villages in the ninja allied forces were inevitably anxious at this moment. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.